Hey there, story lovers. This is DC Harry, and we're bringing you an epic adventure. What if Aquaman brought Harry to Atlantis age 5 and ocean magic made him Wizard King of 7 seas? Hit like, subscribe, and let's begin this journey. Chapter 1, The Boy the Ocean kept the cupboard smelled like old dust and something that had been forgotten on purpose. Harry Potter was 5 years old, and he had learned very early that the best thing he could be was small. Small and quiet and invisible, like the spiders that lived in the corners of his cupboard. He didn't mind the spiders. They were the only things in the house that didn't look at him like he was a problem to be managed. He was talking to one now, a fat brown one that had built a careful web between the hot water pipe and the wall, explaining, in a very serious whisper, why he thought clouds were actually the ocean turned upside down. He'd seen the ocean once, on a television program Dudley had been watching before he got bored and changed the channel. Harry had only caught 30 seconds of it. Blue-black water, deeper than anything, stretching out to a horizon that looked like the edge of the whole world. He'd thought about it every day since. The water has to go somewhere, he told the spider, who was doing something intricate with its legs that Harry took as agreement. When it rains, that's just the ocean remembering it's supposed to be down here with us. A thump from upstairs. Dudley, probably. The ceiling shuddered with his cousin's particular brand of enthusiasm, which mostly involved dropping things and demanding other things be brought to him immediately. Harry tucked his knees tighter to his chest and made himself smaller. He was good at that. What he was less good at was controlling the thing that happened sometimes, the warm, pulling sensation in his chest when he was frightened or angry or, occasionally, when he was so lonely it felt like something physical. Last week it had made every glass in the kitchen cupboard rattle in unison. The week before, when Uncle Vernon had locked him outside in the rain for an hour, every puddle on Privet Drive had risen up about 3 inches and then settled back down with a sound like a long exhale. Harry didn't know what it was. He just knew that it lived in him the way the spider lived in its web, quiet most of the time, but always there, always watching. Outside on Privet Drive, the evening was the particular shade of gray-blue that came just after the sun gave up and before the streetlights bothered to come on. Number 4 was lit up warm and yellow. Inside that warmth, Aunt Petunia's voice, sharp and clipped, the television's canned laughter, the smell of something with gravy that Harry would be allowed to have whatever was left of, later, if he was good and quiet and invisible enough. He was almost asleep when the thing in his chest did something it had never done before. It didn't rattle. It didn't pull. It reached. Like a hand extended in the dark toward something that was reaching back. Harry sat up very straight and stared at the slats of the cupboard door. Through the thin gaps he could see the hallway light, yellow warm and ordinary. Nothing had changed. The spider was still doing its complicated legwork. Dudley was still thumping. Aunt Petunia was still talking to someone on the phone about someone else's curtains. But the thing in Harry's chest was straining, and his heart was hammering, and he pressed his small hand flat against the cupboard wall and felt, just for a second, wild and impossible, something like deep water. Arthur Curry had not intended to be on this street. He'd been tracking a pollution source, an illegal chemical discharge that was killing a reef system off the coast, the trail of it running like a scar through the current maps he kept in his head the way most people kept directions. The trail had led him north along the Thames estuary, which had led him to a service tunnel, which had led him, dripping and irritated, up through a storm drain on the edge of a very ordinary-looking suburb. He stood at the end of Privet Drive and rolled his neck and thought about the fastest route back to water. Then the reef smell hit him. Not the dead reef he'd been tracking. The other kind. The alive kind, that electric, mineral richness that came off a healthy reef system, the smell of 10,000 living things working in concert. It was completely wrong for a landlocked suburb 30 miles from the sea, and it was coming from one of the houses. Arthur was a lot of things. Cautious was rarely one of them. He followed the smell to number 4 and stood on the pavement outside it, cocking his head. From inside came the sounds of ordinary domestic life. But underneath all of it, threading between the walls of the house like something that had been growing there for years, was that impossible smell, alive and deep and pulling. He didn't ring the bell. He wasn't sure why, except that something in his instincts, which were very old and very well developed, said that ringing the bell would be wrong in a way he couldn't immediately articulate. He walked around to the side of the house instead, following the signal, and stopped outside a small window with frosted glass. A bathroom, maybe, or a utility room. No. Too low for that. He looked again. A cupboard, built into the space under the stairs. Vented by a few thin slats of wood set into the door. Not a utility cupboard, there was a thin mattress visible through the gap, and something hanging on the wall that looked like it might be a drawing, a child's drawing, of the ocean. Arthur Curry had excellent eyesight. He looked through the slat and saw a small boy with a shock of black hair and glasses that were a size too large for his face, sitting in the dark with his hand pressed against the wall and his green eyes wide open, staring at nothing. Or staring at Arthur. It was difficult to tell. The smell was pouring off the child like heat off summer tarmac. "Hey," Arthur said, quietly, through the slat. "You okay in there?" The boy startled, a full body flinch that Arthur's gut read immediately, instinctively, as a child who had learned to be afraid of sudden things. But then those green eyes found the slat and focused, and the fear didn't disappear but it moved aside for something else. Curiosity. Pure and undiluted. "You smell like the ocean," the boy said. Arthur blinked. "Yeah," he said. "I get that. I've only seen the ocean once. On telly. It was blue-black and it went on forever." "That's about right. Are you actually from the ocean?" Arthur looked at himself, soaking wet, barnacled bracers, scales on the sides of his neck catching the last of the daylight. "More or less," he said. The boy considered this with the gravity of a 5-year-old making a very important decision. "I've been thinking," he said, "that the ocean is where things belong when no one wants them. Like, the really big things. The ones too big to fit anywhere else." Arthur opened his mouth. Closed it again. Something had lodged in his chest like a fishhook, clean and sharp and unignorable. "What's your name?" he asked. "Harry. Harry Potter." A pause. "I live in the cupboard." "I can see that." Arthur's voice had gone very steady in the way it went when he was holding something down. "Is there someone in the house?" "Family. Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia. And Dudley." Harry's voice was perfectly even. No complaint in it, which was worse than if there had been. "They're inside." "Do they know you're out here?" "I'm always in here," Harry said, like Arthur had asked something slightly silly. "This is where I live." Arthur Curry was not a man who deliberated at length. He'd made decisions that changed the course of wars in the time it took other people to choose what to order for dinner. But he stood outside that cupboard for a full 30 seconds, which was, for him, an eternity. Then he made a decision. He stood up, went to the front door, and knocked. Loud. The kind of knock that said whoever was inside should probably come quickly. Vernon Dursley opened the door and looked at Arthur Curry the way most people looked at Arthur Curry, with a mix of alarm and confusion that was trying very hard to become aggression because aggression was a more comfortable emotion than fear. Vernon Dursley was a large man. Next to Arthur, he looked like a bad rough draft. "Can I help you?" Vernon said, in the tone of voice that actually meant please go away. "I'd like to talk about your nephew," Arthur said. A lot of things happened in Vernon Dursley's face very quickly. Alarm. Guilt. Then the aggression winning out over both. "I don't know what you've been told, he lives in the cupboard under the stairs," Arthur said. "He's 5. He's malnourished." He kept his voice conversational, the way he kept his voice conversational when he was talking to someone he was also considering hitting. "I'm not here to cause a problem. I just want to take him." Vernon Dursley puffed up to his full width. "Now you listen here, I will give you a number," Arthur said, "and you will call it and they will sort out the official side of things. Or I will stand here and keep knocking until every neighbor on this street comes out to watch this conversation." He tilted his head slightly. Your choice. The conversation lasted 4 more minutes. Arthur had made harder negotiations with the rulers of underwater kingdoms. By the end of it, Vernon Dursley had a phone number for what he was told was a government department that handled special cases. Petunia Dursley had said nothing at all but had gone very white, and Arthur Curry had gone back around the side of the house, unlocked the cupboard door from the outside. The lock was on the outside, which made something go cold and flat in Arthur's eyes, and crouched down to Harry Potter's level. Harry was standing up, with a small and very serious expression, holding what appeared to be his entire worldly possessions in a pillowcase. 2 too large shirts. A broken toy soldier. The drawing of the ocean, which he'd taken off the wall. He looked up at Arthur with those enormous green eyes and said, "Are we going to the ocean?" "Yeah," Arthur said. "We are." "Okay," Harry said simply, and walked out of the cupboard. He didn't look back at the house. Not once. They took the tube to the coast. Arthur had learned long ago that arriving places in a column of seawater upset people more than it was generally worth. Harry sat beside him on the train, feet not quite reaching the floor, watching London go past the windows with the intense focus of someone cataloguing everything. He didn't talk much, but when he did talk, he said things that made Arthur keep glancing sideways at him. "Why do people live so far from the water?" he asked, "somewhere around Mile End." "Convenience, mostly," Arthur said. "But the water was there first," Harry said, with the tone of someone identifying a fundamental error in someone else's logic. "Seems rude." 2 stops later, "Do fish have kings?" "Some of them." Harry absorbed this. "Good," he said. "Things should have someone looking out for them." At Southend, they walked down to the beach in the last of the evening light. The tide was coming in. Harry walked ahead of Arthur to the waterline, and Arthur watched him stand there at the edge of the surf, the white foam running over his small bare feet. He'd kicked his shoes off without being asked, and watched the tension go out of the boy's spine like a string being cut. He'd never seen a child do that. Stand at the edge of the ocean and go still. Harry turned around. He was smiling, a real smile, unguarded, the first one Arthur had seen. "It's bigger than the telly," he said. "That's what everyone says." "I'm not everyone," Harry said. Then, without a shred of drama, he walked into the water up to his knees and showed no signs of stopping. Arthur was about to go after him when he noticed that the incoming waves were bending around Harry. Not dramatically, no great parting of waters, no theatrical display, but the surf that hit every other point along the beach was deflecting around him, the way a current bends around a stone it trusts. Like the ocean recognized him and was being careful. Harry had noticed too. He was looking down at the water around his legs with an expression of absolute wonder. "It's warm," he said, which was remarkable because the North Sea in autumn was anything but. "It feels like it knows me." "Maybe it does," Arthur said quietly. Harry looked up at him. "You're taking me somewhere, aren't you? Not just the beach. If you want to go." "I want to go," Harry said immediately, no hesitation. "I've always wanted to go." "You don't know where it is yet." Harry shrugged, which was possibly the most 5-year-old response possible and also, somehow, the wisest. "It's in the ocean," he said. "That's enough." Arthur stepped into the water beside him and held out his hand. Harry took it without drama, just a small hand closing around large fingers with the easy trust of someone who had decided, completely and without reservation. "Hold your breath," Arthur said. "For how long?" "You won't need to." Harry looked at him skeptically, with the skepticism of a child who had been lied to by adults consistently and had therefore developed a calibrated distrust of adult reassurance. But he took a breath anyway. They went under. The first thing was the cold, which was there and then wasn't, replaced immediately by that warmth Harry had felt at his ankles, spreading through him like something waking up. The second thing was the light, not the dark he'd expected, but a rich blue-green luminescence that came from everywhere and nowhere. The third thing was the breathing, which he was doing. He was breathing underwater. He ran his tongue over his teeth and tasted salt and something metallic and alive. He opened his eyes. He looked up at the bottom of the surface world, receding fast. He looked sideways at Arthur Curry, who was looking at him with an expression that wasn't surprise exactly, more like recognition, like someone finding a book they'd stopped believing existed. "You're breathing," Arthur said. His voice carried perfectly in the water, clear as a bell. "I noticed," Harry said. His own voice sounded different down here, fuller, somehow, like it had more room to be itself. "Most surface people can't." Harry considered this as they descended, the light deepening around them, the pressure that should have been increasing instead feeling like being wrapped up in something warm and deliberate. "Am I not a surface person?" he asked. "I don't know yet," Arthur said. "But I'm starting to think you might be something else entirely." They went deeper. The world changed around them by degrees, the cold light of the shallows giving way to something richer and stranger, the scattered coral gardens of the coastal shelf falling away into the deeper architecture of the true ocean floor. Harry watched everything. The bioluminescent trails of deep-water creatures. Schools of fish that parted around them and reformed, a living curtain that rippled at their passing. Things that were large enough that their presence was felt as much as seen, immense shadows moving at the edge of perception. Harry wasn't scared. He was awake in a way he'd never been in his life, every sense opened wide, the thing in his chest no longer reaching outward but settled, content, like a compass that had finally found north. "What's that?" he asked, pointing to a distant light, not bioluminescent, but warm and gold-toned and steady, like a city's worth of windows. "Home," Arthur said. Then, after a pause, "It might be your home too. If you want it." "What is it called?" "Atlantis." Harry tested the word. Said it twice, quietly, to himself. Then he looked at Arthur with those enormous green eyes, bright even in the deep, and said, "Tell me everything." So Arthur talked as they descended, and Harry listened the way only children and very attentive scholars can listen, completely, with his whole self, asking occasional sharp questions that made Arthur re-examine things he thought he'd understood for years. He explained Atlantis, the city, the kingdom, the history compressed into a version a 5-year-old could handle and yet still find magnificent. He explained the Atlantean people and their magic, which was the magic of water and tide and deep world pressure, old as the ocean itself. "Is it different from my magic?" Harry asked. "I don't know. What does your magic feel like?" Harry thought about it. "Like the tide," he said finally. "When it comes in. Like something enormous that knows what it's doing." Arthur didn't say anything. But something in his face shifted. Atlantis at night, or what counted for night in the deep, when the bioluminescent cycles shifted to cooler blues, was extraordinary. Not just in scale, though the scale was its own kind of breathtaking, towers of worked crystal and dark stone rising through the water like a city that had decided gravity was optional, bridges arcing between them, streets that were also currents, gardens of sea life tended with the same care as any surface park. No. It was the feeling of it. The hum of it, beneath everything, like a vast and very old machine doing something important and doing it perfectly. Harry felt it in his chest from half a mile out. The thing in his chest felt it too, and responded like a tuning fork struck against its match. Arthur had signaled ahead, some deep water communication Harry couldn't quite follow, a resonant pulse he sent through the current. By the time they reached the outer gates, there was a woman waiting. She was fierce in the way that the ocean was fierce, not loudly, not performatively, but with the absolute conviction of something that has never seriously considered the possibility of losing. Tall, red-haired in a way that the water made look like a living thing, with eyes the color of the deep ocean on a clear day. She looked at Harry with the kind of assessment that didn't bother to pretend it wasn't an assessment. "This is him," she said to Arthur. "Harry Potter. He breathed underwater from the moment we went under. The tides bend around him. I can see what he is," Mara said, with the authority of someone who spent most of her time seeing things others missed. She crouched down to Harry's level. "I am Mara." What do you think of Atlantis? I think it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, Harry said, and I think I've been here before, except not in real life. Like a memory of somewhere I've never been. Mara held very still. Her eyes went to Arthur's over Harry's head. Arthur shrugged, which was his way of saying I know, I'm aware, I don't have an explanation either. Come, Mara said, standing. You need food and rest. In that order. I'm not very tired, Harry said. You've been living in a cupboard, Mara said, in a voice that could have stripped paint. You are going to eat a significant amount of food and then you are going to sleep in a bed. These are not negotiations. Harry blinked at her. Then, very quietly, no one's ever said that to me before. Said what? That I should eat a lot. He paused. Or sleep in a bed. Mara's jaw went tight in a very specific way. She turned and walked into Atlantis and said, mostly to herself, something in Atlantean that Arthur chose not to translate but that Harry somehow understood perfectly, the words landing in him like seeds finding soil. Not anymore. Not ever again. The weeks that followed were the first weeks of Harry's life that felt like they belonged to him. He was given rooms in the palace that were larger than the entire ground floor of number 4, with walls of pale stone that caught and scattered the deep water light into patterns that moved slowly across the floor like sleeping tides. He didn't know what to do with so much space at first. He slept on the floor for the first 2 nights, which Mara discovered and responded to by removing the bed frame entirely and placing the mattress directly on the floor without comment, which Harry thought was the most practical and kind thing anyone had ever done for him. He ate. Atlantean food was extraordinary, things grown in deep-water gardens and preserved in ways that gave them a mineral richness unlike anything surface food tasted like. He ate carefully at first, still calibrated to taking only what he needed, and then Mara noticed and put a second portion on his plate without asking and looked directly away while she did it, as if the casual dignity of the act mattered more than acknowledgement. He learned the language in 3 weeks. Not learned it exactly, it rose in him like he was remembering it, the way the ocean had felt like remembering. One morning he woke up and Atlantean was simply there, structured and certain in his mind, with a grammar as natural as breathing. He mentioned this to Vulko, the king's advisor, a lean and precise man with the watchful eyes of someone who knew too many things and was very careful about when to deploy them, and Vulko went quiet in a way that meant he was thinking hard about something he wasn't ready to say. Interesting, Vulko said, after a moment. You know what it means, Harry said. He was 5, but he'd been watching adult faces his whole life, calibrating their silences and their avoidances, and he knew when someone was holding something back. I have some theories, Vulko said carefully. Nothing I'm confident enough to share yet. Okay, Harry said. And left it there, which surprised Vulko, who had expected the child to push, but Harry had learned a long time ago that pushing people gave them a reason to close more doors. Better to wait. The right doors opened on their own, eventually, if you were patient enough. He and Arthur had a routine. Every morning, Arthur took him out into the open water for what he called exercise but what Harry experienced as play, swimming distances that would have been impossible for any surface child, diving to pressures that should have been crushing, moving through the water with a building ease that Arthur watched with an expression Harry was learning to read as professionally impressed. Harry was fast. Faster than he should have been, and growing faster, like the water was teaching his body what it already knew in theory. You're swimming like someone who's done this for years, Arthur said, one morning, watching Harry make a turn around a deep-water rock formation that should have required twice the technique Harry had. Feels like I have, Harry said. He hung in the water upright, effortless, and tilted his head. Arthur. Yeah. Are there other children here? Like me? That aren't. I mean, that came from the surface. Arthur was quiet for a moment. No, he said. Just you. Oh. Harry looked at the city spread out below them. Is that going to be a problem? Some people will think so. But you don't. Arthur met his eyes. No, he said. I don't. Harry nodded once. Satisfied. He dove back toward the city in a clean arc that threw off a trail of tiny bubbles like a string of lights, and Arthur watched him go and felt something in his chest that was equal parts hope and protectiveness and something he wasn't quite ready to name. The political tension arrived, as political tensions in Atlantis tended to, in the form of ORM. ORM was Arthur's half-brother and, in the way of royal families, the fact that they were half-brothers made things more complicated rather than less. He was handsome in the cold, deliberate way of people who have decided that attractiveness was a useful tool. He arrived in Atlantis proper on a state visit from Zeeble. His political alliances were a constant, shifting project, and he found out about Harry on his second day. He came to the training courtyard where Harry was working through a set of water flow exercises Mara had designed for him. Harry had been at them for 2 hours and was showing no signs of tiring. Mara was watching from the edge of the courtyard with an expression that was trying very hard to be neutral and only partially succeeding. ORM stood at the courtyard entrance and watched Harry for a moment. Then he said, loudly enough that Harry heard, "This is it. This is the surface child everyone is whispering about." Harry stopped. He turned around and looked at ORM with those steady green eyes that tended to unsettle people who hadn't been looked at with that kind of calm assessment before. "You must be ORM," Harry said. "Careful," Mara said quietly. Not a warning to Harry. A warning to ORM. ORM stepped into the courtyard with the ease of someone who considered all spaces his. "The boy has manners," he said to Mara. "Surprising. How long has he been here?" 3 weeks, Harry said. ORM looked at him with the detached interest of someone evaluating an artifact. "And what is he supposed to be, exactly?" "Arthur's project? His charity case?" "I'm his," Harry started, and then stopped, because he didn't actually have a word for what he was to Arthur yet. "I live here," he said instead. Simply. ORM smiled, which was not a warm thing. Children have been brought to Atlantis before, by well-meaning people with impractical impulses. They don't tend to thrive. "I'm already thriving," Harry said. There was a beat of silence. Mara made a small sound that might have been the beginning of a laugh, swiftly suppressed. ORM looked at him for a long moment. Something in his eyes sharpened, the calculation of someone reassessing a thing he'd initially dismissed. "Confidence is interesting in the very young," he said. "It rarely survives the world's instruction." "Maybe," Harry said. "Or maybe the world learns to work around it." ORM left. Mara waited until his footsteps had faded and then said, in a voice she was working to keep even, "You should be careful with him." "I know," Harry said, and went back to his exercises. "I've met people like him before. In the cupboard, mostly." Mara looked at the back of his small head for a moment. The water in the courtyard rippled once, quietly, with no visible cause. She filed that away. On a Thursday in the 6th week, Harry had started keeping track of days, because it turned out that having days worth keeping track of was entirely different from the formless gray of Privet Drive. Something happened that changed the shape of everything. Harry was in the archives with Volko, ostensibly being taught Atlantean history but actually engaged in what had become their habitual practice of Volko telling him the official version of events and Harry asking questions until the interesting version appeared between the answers. Harry was very good at this. Volko, Harry was beginning to understand, was secretly delighted by it. "What's the Chamber of Tides?" Harry asked. Volko went still in the very specific way he went still when Harry's questions landed somewhere important. "Where did you hear that term?" "I didn't hear it. I read it. In that." Harry pointed to a section of the archive wall where old stone tablets were mounted, historical records so old they predated the written language currently in use. Harry had been slowly working through them for 3 weeks. "It says the Chamber of Tides holds the memory of the ocean. That it was sealed when the 7th king died, because he was the last one who could open it safely." Volko set down his stylus. He looked at Harry for a long, careful moment. The chamber of tides is below the palace, he said. In the deepest foundation. It hasn't been opened in 10,000 years. What's in it? No one knows. The records only say that it requires someone who carries both kinds of magic, landborn and seaborn. Someone who is. Vulko stopped. What? Harry asked. The records use an old term, Vulko said carefully. Complicated to translate. The closest rendering in modern Atlantean would be something like, the place where two oceans meet. Harry thought about this. The thing in his chest, which he'd started privately calling the pull because that was what it did, moved in a slow, deep surge, like a tide responding to a moon that had just risen. Can I see it? Harry asked. The chamber? It's sealed, Vulko said. I know. Can I see it? Vulko looked at him. Harry looked back. The stone tablets on the wall seemed very old and very certain of themselves. After lessons, Vulko said, finally. The chamber of tides was at the very bottom of the palace, below the foundations that Arthur had once told him were 10,000 years old, in the bedrock of the ocean floor itself. The stairs down were narrow and clearly not often used, the walls were thick with that particular kind of stillness that spaces develop when no one has been in them for a very long time. Vulko carried a light. Harry didn't need one. He'd noticed in the last few weeks that the deep ocean dark didn't bother him the way it should. He could navigate it not by sight exactly but by something else, some awareness of the space and what was in it, like a passive sonar he hadn't known he had until it started working. The door to the chamber was cut into the rock at the corridor's end. It was enormous, 12 feet high, twice as wide, worked from a single piece of dark stone that had been carved all over with the old writing, the language of the deep records. Harry pressed his hand flat against it without thinking. The pull surged. Strongly. Like it was recognizing something. The carvings lit up. Not gradually, not in stages, all at once, every line of writing on the door blazing with blue-white light, a cascade of illumination that threw hard-edged shadows up the walls of the corridor. Vulko made a sharp sound. Harry kept his hand pressed against the door. Harry, Vulko said, very quietly. Step back from the door. It's not dangerous, Harry said. He didn't know how he knew. He just did, the way he knew when a current was going to turn before it turned. Harry, the door opened. It swung inward without grinding, without resistance, like it had been waiting to open and was merely grateful for the opportunity. The darkness beyond it was different from the corridor darkness, not empty dark but full dark, pregnant with something, the way a storm sky is full of something before the lightning starts. And then the water came. Not flooding, nothing catastrophic or violent. Water rose through the floor of the chamber in slow, deliberate columns, brackish glowing, catching its own light. And as it rose it formed shapes, not quite figures, not quite symbols, but something between, like language being spoken in 3 dimensions. The ocean speaking in its oldest voice. Harry walked in. Harry. Vulko's voice had gone a register lower. He was pressed against the door frame, staring, and his expression was not fear exactly but something adjacent to it, the face of a man watching something he believed in theoretically for 40 years become suddenly, irrevocably real. Harry stood in the center of the chamber and the water light moved around him, those strange half-shapes orbiting him slowly, and the pull in his chest was open wide as it had ever been, like a window thrown up on a clear day. He tilted his head back and felt the magic, old magic, ocean magic, the kind that predated every kingdom and every king, moving through him the way a tide moves through sand. Not erasing him. Filling him. Finding the spaces that had been empty for 5 years and settling in them like it had always intended to be there. On his left hand, starting at the base of his ring finger and branching outward and upward in lines that were almost but not quite like veins, a mark appeared. Blue-black, the color of the deep ocean, visible even against his skin. It pulsed once with the same light as the chamber walls. Then the water settled. The shapes dissolved. The light ebbed to a quiet, steady glow. Harry stood in the center of the chamber and felt, for the first time in his memory, absolutely and completely whole. He turned around. Vulko was standing in the doorway, one hand braced against the frame, staring at Harry's left hand with the expression of a man who has just watched a prophecy stop being theoretical. "Vulko," Harry said. "What just happened?" Vulko took a slow breath. "Something," he said carefully, "that I am going to need the rest of the night to explain properly." He paused. "And possibly several days." Harry looked at the mark on his hand. It pulsed once more, gently, like a second heartbeat. He thought about the door that had opened. About the water that had known him. He thought about what Vulko had said about the word in the old language. The place where two oceans meet. "Take your time," Harry said. "I'm not going anywhere." And standing in the oldest room in Atlantis, with the ocean's mark burning bright and certain on his hand, Harry Potter smiled. Chapter 2, What the Trident Remembers. The mark didn't fade. Harry had half expected it to, the way things in dreams softened at the edges and then disappeared when you looked directly at them. But 3 days after the Chamber of Tides, the lines on his left hand were still there, still that deep blue-black, still pulsing with that second heartbeat that he'd started to think of as the ocean's equivalent of a handshake. A formal one. The kind that meant something. He was eating breakfast in the palace kitchen, a wide, warm space where the cooks had, over 6 weeks, gone from eyeing him uncertainly to quietly competing over who could get him to eat the most, which was perhaps the best social development of Harry's entire life. When Vulko arrived and set a stack of stone tablets on the table beside his bowl with the air of a man who had been awake for most of 3 days and had opinions about it. "I'm ready," Vulko said. "You look terrible," Harry told him. "Thank you. Eat your breakfast. I'll talk while you eat." Vulko sat down across from him, arranged the tablets in a sequence Harry could see had been thought about, and laced his fingers together. "What do you know about the first Atlantean kings?" "7 of them," Harry said, around a mouthful of something that tasted like it had been grown in a thermal vent and was better for it. Each one was connected to one of the 7 seas. Each one had a different kind of water magic. The 7th king was the last of the lineage, and when he died the bloodline ended and the kingdom almost fell until Arthur's grandfather. "Yes," Vulko said. "The official version. Now the version underneath that version." He slid the first tablet across. The 7 kings weren't simply rulers. They were stewards. The ocean chose them, specifically chose them, because of what they carried. Not just water magic. The first king was a surface man. Harry put his spoon down. "What?" "A surface man who carried what the old records call Earth Main, earthborn power. Land magic. He came to the coast in a storm and the ocean recognized something in him, the same way it recognized you." Vulko touched the edge of the tablet. "The convergence of land magic and sea magic in a single person creates something that is more than either. The old records call it by several names. Tide Warden. Deep Caller. Most commonly," he slid another tablet across, "the Wizard King of 7 Seas." Harry looked at the tablet. The old writing was clear to him now, as natural as reading English had ever been, clearer, actually, more precise. He read the passage Vulko was indicating and was quiet for a moment. "The mark on my hand," he said, "is the mark of the chamber's recognition. It means the ocean magic has identified you as a potential wizard king. Not confirmed. Potential." Vulko held up a finger. "The confirmation requires the 7 seals, trials, 1 for each sea. Ancient. Incredibly dangerous. Not undertaken in 10,000 years, because there hasn't been a candidate in 10,000 years." He paused. "There is also the matter of the trident." "Arthur's trident?" "No. The trident of the 7 seas is different from the trident of Atlantis. Arthur's weapon is powerful, but it is a weapon. The trident of the 7 seas is," Vulko searched for the right word. "It is the ocean's voice made physical. It responds only to the Wizard King. It has been sleeping in the deepest vault of the palace since the seventh king died. He looked at Harry steadily. Until 3 days ago, the vault was sealed. This morning, I went to check it. And the vault is open, Volko said. The trident is still inside. But the locks are gone. It is simply waiting. Harry sat with this for a moment. Around them, the kitchen carried on its warm domestic business, entirely unconcerned with ancient prophecy. One of the cooks slid another portion of the thermal vent thing into Harry's bowl without comment. "Does Arthur know?" Harry asked. "Not yet. I wanted to speak with you first." Volko looked at him carefully. "You are 5 years old, Harry. What I'm describing is a burden that has broken people far older and better prepared. I want to be certain that you understand what the mark means before we tell anyone else." Harry looked at the mark on his hand. The pulsing light of it. He thought about the door opening. About the water knowing him. About the way the ocean had felt from the first moment, not foreign, not overwhelming, but his. Like something that had been his all along and was only now getting around to the formalities. "I understand," he said. "Tell Arthur." Volko studied him for a long, considering moment. "You're not afraid," he said. "Should I be?" "Most people would be." Harry picked his spoon back up. "Most people haven't lived in a cupboard," he said. After that, a prophecy is just information. Arthur took it better than Volko expected and worse than Harry expected, which meant he paced for 20 minutes in the archive room while Volko laid out the tablets and Harry sat on a reading bench and ate an apple, waiting for the pacing to run its course. "The Wizard King prophecy," Arthur said, for the third time, like repeating it might change its content. "The tablets are consistent across 6 independent sources," Volko said. "The chamber opening was not a malfunction or an anomaly. The mark is, I can see the mark." Arthur stopped pacing and looked at Harry, who looked back at him. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Harry said. "I've been fine. You've been pacing for a while. I have a lot of feelings about this." "I know. But I'm okay." Arthur ran a hand through his hair. He sat down heavily in the chair across from Harry and leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and looked at him the way he'd been looking at him since Southend, with that mix of protectiveness and something that was working toward being more than that. "You understand what the seals mean? The trials? Dangerous and old and not done in 10,000 years, Harry said. Volko explained. "I'm not going to let a 5-year-old, the ocean magic already marked him," Volko said, quietly. "The choice isn't ours to make, Arthur. It wasn't made by us." The silence in the room had the quality of a tide turning, the moment between the water going out and the water coming back. Arthur sat with it. Harry watched the conflict move through him, the Guardian's instinct against the Atlanteans' understanding of what the oceans will meant. "Not yet," Arthur said finally. "Not the seals. Not until he's older, better trained, better prepared." He looked at Volko. "The mark, does it expire? Is there a timeline?" "The records are unclear on specifics," Volko admitted. "Then we have time." Arthur looked at Harry. "You're going to learn everything we can teach you. Both kinds of magic. Water and, whatever the land magic in you is. And then, when you're ready, okay," Harry said. Arthur blinked. "Okay. I'm 5, Harry said reasonably. I wasn't going to suggest doing it tomorrow." He took another bite of his apple. "Can I see the trident? The one in the vault?" A pause. Arthur looked at Volko. Volko made a small gesture that meant technically there's no rule against it. "After breakfast," Arthur said. "I'm done with breakfast," Harry said, and stood up. The vault was deeper than the Chamber of Tides, which Harry hadn't thought was possible, but Atlantis turned out to be a place with significant depth in multiple senses. The stairs wound down through solid rock that hummed faintly with the pressure of the ocean above, not threatening but present, like a very large and very calm thing that was aware of you. The trident was in the center of the vault floor, standing upright in a cradle of dark stone that had been carved to receive it. It was not large, that was the first thing Harry noticed. He'd expected something Arthur-scaled, a weapon for a man who wrestled krakens. This was elegant. Shorter than the Atlantean royal trident, with 3 tines that curved slightly outward at the tips and a shaft that was worked with the same old writing as the chamber door and the ancient tablets. The metal was dark, close to black, but caught light from somewhere and turned it blue-white. It looked like the ocean given a spine. Harry stood at the entrance to the vault and looked at it. It looked back. That was the only way he could describe it. There was a sense of reciprocal attention, a mutual awareness that traveled the 20 feet between them like a current. He took a step toward it. The trident pulsed. One long, slow surge of blue-white light, exactly matching the pulse in the mark on his hand. "Ha," Arthur said softly, behind him. Harry walked to it. He stopped in front of it and looked at it for a moment, then looked at the mark on his hand, which was bright now, brighter than he'd seen it, lit up like a lamp. He reached out and wrapped his hand around the shaft. It felt like holding the ocean's hand. Nothing explosive, nothing dramatic. No pillar of light, no thunderclap. Just warmth, and depth, and the absolute, unshakable sense of rightness, the same thing he'd felt standing in the chamber, but more specific now, more directed. The trident knew him. Not because it had learned him. Because it had been waiting for him, exactly him, this specific convergence of salt water and old magic blood, for 10,000 years. He let go after a moment. His hand was shaking slightly, not from fear. From the effort of handling that much recognition at age 5. "I'll come back when I'm bigger," he told the trident. He could have sworn it pulsed once in acknowledgement. 3 things happened in quick succession over the following week that changed the temperature of Atlantis's politics regarding Harry Potter, and none of them were subtle. The first was that ORM found out about the mark. Harry didn't know how, palace information moved through channels he was still mapping, but ORM arrived in the training courtyard on a morning when Harry was working with Mara, and this time the detached assessment in his eyes had been replaced by something sharper and more concerning. "Show me," ORM said, without preamble. Harry raised his left hand. The mark pulsed, because it always pulsed when someone looked at it, which he decided was either the ocean being dramatic or the mark being territorial. ORM looked at it for a long time. His face was doing the thing it did when he was thinking hard about something he didn't intend to share. Then he looked at Mara. "You're aware of what this means?" "Obviously," Mara said. "And you're comfortable with it?" "I'm not sure that's your concern." ORM's jaw tightened. A surface-born child with no Atlantean blood, no Atlantean lineage, carrying the mark of the Wizard King. "I'd argue that's everyone's concern." "The ocean doesn't check lineage," Harry said. Both of them looked at him. Harry kept his voice easy. He wasn't angry. ORM was a problem to be understood, not a threat to be reacted to, and Harry had learned very young that reacting was the thing that gave other people control of a situation. "The ocean chose what it chose," Harry continued. "That's not something you argue with. Even you know that." ORM looked at him with that recalibrating expression again, the one Harry had first seen in the courtyard. "More careful now. More considering. You're 5 years old," ORM said. "And already correct," Harry said pleasantly. "Imagine what I'll be like at 15. ORM left without another word. Mara waited until he was gone and then turned to Harry with an expression that was trying to be stern and not managing it. "Don't antagonize him." "I wasn't antagonizing. I was clarifying. There's less difference than you think." But her mouth was doing the thing it did when she was trying not to smile, and Harry had become very good at reading that. The second thing was Mara's lesson. She'd been teaching him water manipulation for 2 weeks, the Atlantean form of it, precise and mathematical, built on understanding current and pressure and the ocean's own movement. Harry was a quick study, but quickness wasn't what surprised Mara. It was the way his magic worked, not quite like Atlantean water magic, which imposed the practitioner's will on the water, and not quite like what she understood of surface wizarding magic. Harry's magic negotiated. He asked the water what it wanted to do and then directed it along those lines, like a conductor rather than a dictator. The results were cleaner and faster and more complete than anything she'd seen from students twice his age. On the morning of the third week, she set him a complex exercise, a water-form construction that required maintaining 7 separate current streams simultaneously, something a trained Atlantean soldier spent 6 months learning. She set it and stepped back and watched. Harry looked at the water for about 4 seconds. Then he built it. Not struggling through it, not approximating it, built it cleanly and completely, all 7 streams running in their proper relationships, and then looked up at her and said, "What's the next one?" Mara looked at the water construction, which was, she had to admit, better structured than anything she could have done at 20, and then at Harry. "Do it again," she said. "But this time backwards." Harry looked at her. "Show me it can come apart as cleanly as it went together," she said. Harry looked at the construction. He took it apart backwards, each stream dissolving in the reverse order they'd been built, controlled and even, nothing spilling. He did it in about 6 seconds. Mara turned around and walked to the far end of the training courtyard, ostensibly to retrieve something from her notes but actually to have a moment where no one was watching her face. She had been teaching water magic for 15 years. She had taught Arthur, who was gifted and powerful and deeply uninterested in technical precision. She had taught royal children and soldiers and diplomats. She had never, in 15 years, seen a student do what that 5-year-old just did on his 3rd week. She came back with her face composed. "Your land magic," she said. "I want to see it." "I don't really control it yet," Harry said. "It just happens." "I know. I want to see it happen." "I'd need to be upset or scared to. Tell me about the cupboard," Mara said. Not cruelly. Quietly, with intention. Harry went still. His face didn't change. He had a habit of stillness when things got close to the parts of himself he kept careful, but the water in the training courtyard rippled. Not the structured ripple of Atlantean magic. Something rawer. Something older. "The lock," Harry said, after a moment. It was on the outside. The water rose. Not violently, it didn't surge or crash. It simply lifted, the whole surface of the training pool rising in one smooth sheet, and held there, 3 feet above where it should have been, trembling with contained force. The light in it was gold-green, not the blue-white of Atlantean magic. Entirely different. Ancient in a way that made Mara's throat go tight. Then Harry blinked and it came down, clean and controlled, not a drop spilled. He looked at his hands. "There it is," Mara said softly. "Sorry," Harry said. "I said I couldn't, don't apologize." Mara crossed to him and crouched down and looked at him very directly. "That magic, that gold-green thing, you have nothing to be sorry for. Not ever. Do you understand me?" Harry met her eyes. He nodded once, careful and believing. "Good," she said. "Now. Let's figure out how to teach you to do that on purpose." The third thing was the visit from the surface. Harry was in the archive with Volko when the guard came, one of the palace's senior watchers, a woman named Tula who had the efficient manner of someone who dealt in facts and considered embellishment a waste of her time. She spoke to Volko in low Atlantean and handed him a message cylinder sealed with something that looked like wax but wasn't. Volko opened it, read it, and went very still. "What is it?" Harry asked. "A query," Volko said carefully. "From the surface. From someone representing." He reread the passage. "A group of surface magic users. They're tracking a magical signature consistent with," he looked at Harry, "with someone like you." "Wizards," Harry said. "You know about surface wizards?" "I knew I had magic before I came here." And I've been reading your archives for 2 months. There are references to surface magic users in 4 different chapters of the deep history. Harry kept his voice level, filing the information away. What do they want? To know if anyone in Atlantis has encountered a child with unusual magical ability who went missing from the surface approximately 2 months ago. Volko set the cylinder down. They don't know you're here. They're querying widely, merfolk clans, sea nations, any undersea civilization with surface contact. A pause. The signature they're describing is yours. Harry thought about this for a moment. He felt something small and cold move through him, not fear, but a kind of alertness. The surface world. The wizarding world. People looking for him. He hadn't thought about that side of things much, hadn't wanted to, because the surface had not given him much reason to think well of it. What are you going to tell them? He asked. Volko looked at him steadily. I was going to tell them we have no information, he said. But I wanted to ask you first. This small act of consultation, of asking him, a 5-year-old, before making a decision that concerned him, landed somewhere deep in Harry's chest and sat there warm and solid. He thought about it. Tell them you have no information, he said. But keep the message. Why keep it? Because whoever sent it will send another one eventually. And the second message will tell us more about them than the first one does. Harry looked at the cylinder. Someone is looking for me. I want to know as much about who they are before they find me as I can. Volko picked up his stylus and began composing the reply. He kept his face carefully neutral, but Harry caught the small upward twitch at the corner of his mouth. You know, Volko said, as he wrote, the old records described the Wizard King as someone whose understanding of the currents, political and oceanic, was unparalleled. I'm 5, Harry said. I'm just paying attention. Yes, Volko said. That's exactly what I mean. Arthur found him that evening on the palace's outer terrace, a broad shelf of worked stone that jutted out over the open ocean, where the city's lights faded and the deep water became simply itself, dark and enormous and alive. Harry liked to come here when the day had been full. The ocean at this distance felt like company without obligation. Arthur sat beside him on the stone. For a while neither of them spoke. That was one of the things Harry had discovered about Arthur. He was comfortable with silence in a way that surface adults almost never were. Most adults, Harry had found, used silence as a weapon or a wound. Arthur used it as space. Mara told me about the lesson, Arthur said, finally. The water going up, Harry said. Yeah. It happens when Harry paused, finding the right word. When I'm close to something. Something I'm carrying. The Desleys, Arthur said. He didn't make it a question. His voice was very even, which Harry had learned meant he was feeling something strongly and had decided that the feeling was his to manage, not Harry's. It's fine, Harry said. I know. You keep telling me that. Because it's true. Harry looked out at the dark water. It's not that it doesn't, it's not that there's nothing there. It's just. It was before. This is now. He paused. It's hard to miss somewhere you never wanted to be. Arthur nodded slowly. He reached over and put his hand briefly on Harry's shoulder, just for a moment, easy and uncomplicated. I've been thinking, he said. About making it official. Making what official? You. Here. Arthur kept his eyes on the water. In Atlantis. Permanently. With, whatever status makes sense. Guardian. Ward. I haven't figured out the right word yet. Harry looked at him. He felt the warm, solid thing in his chest expand slightly. Is there a word in Atlantean? He asked. Merrick, Arthur said. It means, it's complicated. It means someone who belongs to the sea and to you in equal measure. Harry turned the word over. Felt its shape. The ocean around them moved in its slow, enormous rhythm, and the mark on his hand pulsed once. Yeah, Harry said. That works. Arthur exhaled. Something in his shoulders released. He hadn't, Harry realized, been certain of the answer, which was interesting. Arthur was almost never uncertain about things, and that uncertainty, that genuine care about what Harry wanted, meant more than the question itself. They sat on the terrace for a long time. The deep ocean went about its business. The lights of Atlantis reflected up through the water in shifting gold-blue patterns. Harry tracked a bioluminescent creature the size of a whale moving somewhere far below them, its body making slow loops in the dark. Arthur, he said. Yeah. ORM's going to be a problem. I know. He's not going to try something obvious. He's going to work through other people and through the councils and through old laws we haven't thought about yet. Arthur looked at him sideways. You got all that from 3 conversations with him? 2 conversations and watching him in council from the archive window, Harry said. He's smart. He believes what he's saying, he's not just power-hungry, he genuinely thinks he's protecting Atlantis from something wrong. Harry paused. That makes him more dangerous than someone who just wants power. People who think they're right are harder to argue with. Arthur was quiet for a moment. When did you get so? I had a lot of time in a cupboard, Harry said. Arthur made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. It was rougher than that, and it didn't last long. We're going to figure out the seals, he said. The trials. We're going to do this the right way, in the right order, with enough time for you to be ready. I know, Harry said. He felt it with the same certainty with which he felt the ocean, not anxious, not impatient. Just certain. Like a tide that knew where it was going. And ORM? We watch him, Harry said. And we make sure we're more prepared than he is when he moves. The bioluminescent creature completed its loop below them and moved away into the deep dark, its light shrinking to a point and then disappearing. Harry watched it go. 6 months into his time in Atlantis, Harry Potter was no longer the small, flinching boy who had lived in a cupboard on Privet Drive. He was still small, he was 5, and then 6, and the ocean fed him and the training built him but couldn't circumvent basic biology, but the flinching was gone. Completely. The reflex had been replaced by something else, something that didn't have a single good word for it but that Mara, in a private moment with Arthur, described as still water before a wave. He trained every morning with Mara and every afternoon with Arthur in the open ocean. He studied with Vulko every evening, working through the old records, building a map of Atlantean history and law and culture that was already more comprehensive than most adult citizens. He was in a second round of language acquisition, working on the variations across the 7 sea nations, Zeeble, the Trench, the Kingdom of the Deserters, the others, because Vulko had pointed out once, carefully, that a king who only spoke one dialect of his subjects' language was a king who only heard one version of events. Harry had immediately understood this and begun working through the variations with the same systematic focus he brought to everything. Vulko had stopped being surprised by him and had graduated to a state of consistent, low-level wonder that he wore as simply as his robes. The land magic was developing too, which was something none of them had expected. Without a proper teacher, no wizarding instruction, no Hogwarts, no owls delivering letters to a cupboard, it should have stayed raw and uncontrolled. Instead it was learning from the water magic. The 2 systems were talking to each other inside Harry, running in parallel, cross-referencing, the ocean's old grammar organizing the land magic's rawer instincts into something with shape and purpose. Mara called it unprecedented. Vulko called it exactly consistent with the old prophecy's description. Arthur called it extraordinary, in the voice he used when he was very proud of something and trying to be restrained about it. Harry just called it his. On the last day of his 6th month in Atlantis, ORM made his first formal move. He brought it to the High Council, a petition, beautifully written, citing 17 separate articles of Atlantean law, arguing that a surface-born child with no Atlantean blood, regardless of any mark or any magical occurrence, had no legal right to residence in the city, let alone the palace. That the precedent of allowing a potential wizard king claim from outside the bloodlines was destabilizing. That the proper and lawful course was to return Harry to the surface, inform the surface magic users who had been querying through diplomatic channels, and let the matter resolve through surface institutions. Arthur would have walked into the council chamber and argued face to face if left to his own devices. Mara would have done the same with more precision and considerably more force. Harry, when he found out, Tula had brought him the summary, watching him carefully as she did, because she'd been watching him carefully for weeks and had formed her own private opinions, read the petition summary, sat with it for a moment, and then asked Volko a single question. Which of the 17 articles would still apply if I had formal ward status under the royal house? Volko read through. Checked his notes. Read through again. Looked up at Harry. 2, he said. And both of those have counter-precedents from the Third Dynasty. Counter-precedents that ORM definitely knows about, Harry said. He does. So he knows the petition won't work as written. Volko set the papers down. No, he said slowly. The petition isn't meant to work. It's meant to occupy Arthur's attention, establish the legal argument formally on the record, and, he stopped. And identify who on the council agrees with him, Harry finished. Even if they vote it down, the vote tells him who his allies are. He looked at Volko. This is round 1. Not the actual move. Volko stared at him. He was 63 years old and had served 3 kings and attended 1,000 council sessions. He stared at the 6-year-old on the other side of the table and felt, very specifically, the sensation of being the less clever person in a conversation. Arthur needs to vote it down cleanly, Harry said. Quickly, without making it a large event. Don't give ORM the debate he's looking for. And do the ward formalization now, today if possible. Close the legal door before he finds another way through it. Agreed, Volko said. He was already writing. Harry looked at the petition summary again. His hand, the marked hand, rested on the table beside it. The lines on it pulsed their slow, certain rhythm. Volko, he said. When you were talking about the prophecy. About what the Wizard King is supposed to do. He kept his eyes on the petition. It says the Wizard King comes when the 7 seas are divided. When the kingdoms stop speaking to each other. Yes, Volko said carefully. That's happening now, isn't it? Not dramatically. Slowly. ORM's alliances. The trade disputes. The trenches isolation. Harry looked up. The reason I'm here isn't just about power. It's about someone who can stand in every sea and still be trusted by all of them. Volko set his stylus down. He looked at Harry for a long, quiet moment. The prophecy says the Wizard King would know this, he said softly. Not be told. Would know it. Harry looked at the mark on his hand. Yeah, he said. I know it. The petition was voted down in council that afternoon, 7-2. The ward formalization was signed that evening, making Harry formally Monarch of the Royal House of Atlantis, which closed 11 of ORM's 17 articles permanently and left the remaining 6 in deeply unfriendly legal territory. ORM, informed of both outcomes, said nothing. He looked at Arthur for a long moment. Then he looked at Harry, who was standing beside Arthur with his hands in his pockets and his expression easy and open. The look ORM gave Harry was different from the previous ones. Not dismissal. Not calculated threat. Something closer to recognition. Harry met his eyes and held them and smiled, politely, entirely without aggression, the smile of someone who has just played a move in a game they intend to win and knows there are many more moves ahead. ORM turned and left. That went well, Arthur said, watching his half-brothers retreating back. Round 1, Harry said. Arthur looked down at him. You're 6. I know, Harry said cheerfully. Imagine round 2. Chapter 3, The King's Blood and the Sea's Choice. 7 years is a long time to become someone. Harry Potter at 12 was not a different person from the small boy Arthur had found on Privet Drive. He was that boy grown into himself, the way a reef grows into its shape, adding depth and complexity without losing the original structure. The green eyes were the same, still that unsettling shade of still-water clarity. The black hair was still chaotic in the way that suggested the ocean had decided to have opinions about it. The scar on his forehead was still there, though most people in Atlantis who noticed it assumed it was a training mark and moved on. What had changed was everything around those constants. He was taller, not tall for his age, never going to be Arthur's scale, but built with the particular lean density of someone who had spent 7 years training in deep ocean pressure. He moved like water moved, which was to say, without wasted effort, with absolute awareness of everything around him, and with the quiet certainty of something that knew exactly where it was going and had cleared a path before you noticed it was moving. His magic, both kinds, had grown in parallel with everything else, 2 rivers running beside each other that had, somewhere in the last 3 years, started running together. The Atlantean water magic was refined and enormous, far beyond what any student his age should have had access to. The land magic, the gold-green thing that tasted of old forests and deep stone, had organized itself into something structured and precise that Volko could find no precedent for in any record, surface or undersea. It did what Harry asked it to do, and it asked him in return to be worthy of it, and so far he had been. The mark on his hand covered more territory now. Not dramatically, it hadn't doubled or tripled, but the lines had spread slightly, settling into new branches the way old writing carved itself deeper into stone over centuries. It pulsed with a rhythm that matched his heartbeat when he was calm and outpaced it when he was focused. The trident in the vault, which Harry visited on the first day of every month with the regularity of someone checking in on something they were in a long relationship with, had been glowing a little brighter each time. He was ready. He knew it. Mara knew it. Volko knew it. Arthur knew it and was still working through his feelings about it, which was very Arthur. The 7 seals were invoked on a Tuesday, because the tide charts Volko had been monitoring for 2 years indicated that Tuesday was when all 7 sea currents ran in optimal alignment, which happened once every 11 years and wasn't coming again anytime soon. The invocation itself was a ceremony, old, formal, conducted by the high priests of the deep in a chamber below even the chamber of tides, with the high council present and the ambassadors of 4 sea nations who had been informed enough in advance to make the journey. ORM was present. Of course he was. He stood with the council observers in his formal Zabelian dress and watched the ceremony with the focused stillness of someone taking very careful notes. He had not made another direct legal move against Harry in 7 years, the ward formalization had closed too many doors, but he had been busy in other ways. His alliances across the sea nations had grown. His arguments about Atlantean purity had found audiences. His opposition to Harry's claim was no less absolute, it had simply become patient. Harry stood in the center of the ceremony chamber and felt the 7 seals activate around him, 7 points of deep blue light, spaced at equal intervals, each representing one of the seas. The invocation was spoken in the oldest form of Atlantean, which Harry read and spoke as easily as he breathed, and the words settled into the room with the weight of things that had been waiting to be said for a very long time. The high priest, an ancient woman named Niam who moved like a current and spoke like deep water, finished the final phrase and looked at Harry. "The candidate has 7 days," she said. "1 trial per sea. The order is the ocean's choice, not ours. You will know each trial when the sea presents it." She paused. "No guide. No weapon. Only what you carry." Harry looked at Arthur, who was standing at the chamber's edge with his jaw set in the particular way it set when he was holding back something large. Harry gave him a small nod, "I'm fine, I know, stop worrying," and got a complicated expression in return that contained several emotions, the primary one being pride working hard to outvote fear. He looked at Mara. Mara looked back at him with the expression she always wore when she was watching him do something she'd spent years preparing him for, sharp and fierce and present. He looked at Volko, who gave him the smallest, most scholarly bow Harry had ever seen, precise and genuine. He looked at ORM, who was looking at him with those calculating eyes and making no expression at all. Harry turned back to the high priest. "I'm ready," he said. The 7 lights pulsed once in unison. The floor of the chamber opened. And Harry went down. The first trial took him to the Pacific. He didn't travel there physically. The seals worked through the ocean's own pathways, moving candidates through the deep current roads that connected all 7 seas beneath their separate surfaces. One moment he was in the chamber. The next he was in open deep Pacific water, the pressure enormous, the dark absolute, the silence, the particular silence of the oldest ocean on the planet. Something was wrong with the water. He felt it immediately, a wrongness like a wound, a section of current that was circling back on itself instead of flowing forward, disrupting the larger pattern the way an infection disrupts a bloodstream. He dove toward it, following the damage upstream, and found the source after 20 minutes of hard swimming, a deep-water volcanic formation that had shifted, partially blocking a primary current channel that fed into a wider circulation system. Not a fight. Not a challenge of strength. A problem. The Pacific's trial was a problem. Harry circled the formation twice, reading it. The blockage was recent, geological time was different down here, but the disruption in the surrounding rock pattern said this shift had happened in years, not centuries. The formation was partially stable, partially in motion, still settling. Direct removal would risk a larger collapse. Indirect routing would work, but required understanding the surrounding current architecture well enough to redirect without creating secondary damage. He worked for 3 hours. He used water magic and land magic in combination, the water magic reading the current patterns, the land magic interfacing with the rock itself, feeling the geological stress lines the way you'd feel the grain in wood before cutting it. He opened a secondary channel in the rock formation, gradual and precise, angling it to capture and redirect the disrupted current with minimum pressure on the surrounding structure. When the current ran clear, flowing clean and smooth through the new channel, the circular disruption smoothing out downstream like a knot being untied, the Pacific lit up around him. Not metaphorically. The water bloomed with bioluminescence for a mile in every direction, thousands of deep-water creatures responding to the current's restoration with their living light, and the trial mark that appeared on his left wrist burned blue-white and warm. First seal. He had 6 more days. The second trial was the Southern Ocean. The Southern Ocean at its deepest was a different proposition from the Pacific. Colder, more violent, the water itself seeming angrier, not malevolent, but uncompromising, the way extreme cold is uncompromising. The trial here was not a problem of geology. It was a problem of politics. A pod of deep-sea creatures, enormous, ancient, the kind that appeared in Atlantean records as near mythological, were dying. Not from natural causes. A territorial dispute between 2 smaller deep-water species had disrupted their migration path, blocking the feeding grounds they'd used for millennia. Neither of the disputing species was acting out of malice. Both were responding to real pressures, population growth, shifting food sources. They were just caught in a pattern that was killing something larger than both of them combined. Harry spent the first hour observing. Just watching, reading the situation, mapping every party's position and motivation the way Volko had taught him, not what they're doing, but why, and what do they need that they're not getting from the current arrangement. He spent the second hour talking. Not commanding. Talking. His understanding of the deep ocean communication systems, the pressure language, the current signals, the bioluminescent patterning that passed for vocabulary down here, was good enough to make his meaning clear if not perfectly precise. He didn't tell either party to stop. He showed them an arrangement that addressed both their needs and also freed the migration corridor. He drew it in pressure pulses and current patterns and waited. The negotiation took 4 hours. There were moments when it almost fell apart. Both species had deep patterns of behavior that didn't want to change, and change was being asked of them, and in those moments Harry held the position patiently and let time do the work that force would have undone. By the end, the migration corridor was open. The pod of ancients moved through it, their vast bodies creating their own current. One of them, passing Harry, turned a single enormous eye toward him, an eye older than most surface civilizations, and held his gaze for a moment. Harry felt whatever it was seeing him. felt himself be known by something genuinely ancient. The Southern Ocean's seal mark appeared. Second seal. He got the Arctic on the third day and the Indian Ocean on the fourth. The Arctic trial was endurance, pure and simple, the sea testing whether what it had marked would hold under extended pressure without shattering. Harry spent 14 hours moving through water that was at the absolute limit of what living things could survive, following a deep current path that wound through the most hostile geography the ocean possessed, with no warmth and no light and nothing to read by except his own internal compass. He came out the other side with both seal marks burning on his arm and the Arctic's cold still in his bones, fading slowly, and a profound and wordless respect for everything that lived in that water all the time. The Indian Ocean gave him a storm. Not a surface storm, a deep water storm, a pressure event that moved through the water like a living thing, churning everything, directionless and enormous. The trial was navigation, find the quiet center and hold it while the storm moved around him, and then, from that center, identify the single thread of current that would lead out. The storm wanted him to fight it or flee it. Harry did neither. He found the center and stayed there for 2 hours while the storm worked itself out, and navigated out through the quiet current the moment the path appeared. Third and fourth seals. 3 days left. 3 trials remaining. ORM moved on the third day. Harry was between trials, back in Atlantis briefly, eating and resting because Niamh had told him the transitions required recovery time and she had said it in a tone that made ignoring her seem inadvisable, when Tula found him. Her face was doing the thing it did when she had information that was going to require immediate action. The Atlantic trial, she said. Someone has interfered with the trial ground. Harry set down his food. How? We don't know exactly. The trial grounds are supposed to be inviolable, the ocean magic protects them. But something has changed in the Atlantic approach. Niamh noticed it this morning. The current patterns in the trial corridor are wrong. Tula paused. They've been altered. Something has been placed there. Something dangerous. Something designed to look like part of the trial until it isn't. Harry looked at his arm, for seal marks glowing steady on his wrist and forearm, the fifth space waiting. He thought about ORM. About patience. About 7 years of watching and waiting for the right moment. The trial still has to be taken, he said. Arthur wants to postpone until, the alignment window closes in 4 days, Harry said. After that, 11 years. He stood up. Where's Arthur? The argument with Arthur lasted 8 minutes, which was actually shorter than Harry had expected given the material. Arthur's position was clear and grounded in genuine care. Something was in the trial ground, something placed there deliberately. The trials were supposed to be without interference and this violated the covenant. There was no guarantee Harry's survival was assured under altered conditions. Harry's position was equally clear. ORM had bet on exactly this response. Had bet that concern for Harry's safety would make them back down. If they postponed, the alignment window closed, the trials couldn't be completed for 11 years, and Harry's claim remained permanently unconfirmed. No Wizard King, no Trident, no formal authority. 11 years of an unconfirmed claim in increasingly hostile political waters. He's been patient for 7 years, Harry said. He waited for the trial period. He knew this was the only window and he used it. If we back down now, we're handing him exactly what he wants. I'm not putting you into a compromise trial to win a political argument, Arthur said. It's not a political argument. It's my life. Harry's voice was even, not heated. My claim. My trials. And the Atlantic is one of them. He met Arthur's eyes. I've been preparing for 7 years. Whatever ORM put in there, I can handle it. You don't know what it is. No. But I know what I am. Harry said it simply, without arrogance. Just fact. The way he'd say water flows downhill. Let me go. Arthur looked at him for a long moment. Harry looked back. This was not a negotiation, Harry wasn't going to be talked out of it, and they both knew it. and part of Arthur's conflict was that he knew Harry was right and still had to work through the protective instinct that didn't care about being right. Mara goes to the trial threshold, Arthur said finally. Stays outside the boundary. If you don't emerge within 24 hours, Harry said. Standard trial window. Arthur's jaw worked. 12. 18, Harry said. And she stays outside the boundary regardless. No one enters. The trial has to be mine. A pause. 18, Arthur said. Harry nodded. He turned to go. Harry. Arthur's voice. Harry stopped. Come back. Always, Harry said, and didn't look back because if he saw Arthur's face right now it would make something hard inside him go softer and he needed to be hard for this. The Atlantic trial ground was a formation deep in the mid-Atlantic ridge, a cathedral space of volcanic rock and ancient current, where the ocean floor split along a fault line that ran the length of the Atlantic basin. The ocean magic was present here in a way that felt almost architectural, the trial ground constructed out of it, the boundaries of the space defined by currents that didn't allow outside interference. Except someone had found a way inside anyway. Harry felt at the moment he crossed the threshold. The trial ground's ocean magic was intact, the boundary, the structure, the fundamental framework of the trial. But inside it, woven into the natural currents with enough subtlety to pass casual inspection, was something else. Something placed with precision and knowledge. Atlantean dark water magic, the kind that had been formally outlawed for 600 years but that certain people in certain alliances with certain priorities had kept the knowledge of. It wasn't designed to kill him outright. That would have been too obvious, too traceable. It was designed to redirect, to alter the trial's nature at a crucial point, to create a situation where the trial's own ocean magic would work against him without any outside hand being visible in it. Sophisticated. Patient. The work of someone who understood both the trial mechanics and the magic well enough to subvert both without appearing to touch either. Harry spent 20 minutes mapping it. Full perimeter, understanding the placement, the trigger points, the intended mechanism. He traced it back along its lines of influence like reading a text backward, finding the logic of it, the point where ORM's design intersected with the trial's natural structure. Then he went forward and let the trial begin. The Atlantic trial was scale. Where the Pacific had been precision and the Southern Ocean had been negotiation, the Atlantic was vast, a test of whether the candidate could feel and respond to the ocean at its full size. The trial required Harry to hold simultaneous awareness of the entire Atlantic basin, every major current, every pressure gradient, every living thing in the water contributing to or drawing from the system. Not control, just awareness. Being present to all of it at once without collapsing under the weight of it. It was, under normal conditions, probably the most demanding of the 7 trials. Under compromised conditions, with ORM's dark water working threaded through it, it was designed to become something else. The awareness expansion that the trial required would trigger the dark water working at the moment Harry was most open, most connected to the Atlantic's full system, and use that openness against him, flooding the expanded awareness with noise and pressure designed to overwhelm rather than illuminate. Harry felt at the moment the expansion began. Felt himself opening up to the Atlantic's full scale and felt, simultaneously, the dark water trigger firing, the flood of interference beginning, a wall of noise rushing toward the open channel like a rogue wave toward an open window. He did something ORM hadn't predicted. He expanded further. Not away from the interference, into it. He took the full expansion the trial demanded and pushed it past the trial's intended scope, opening his awareness past the Atlantic and out into the surrounding seas, pulling in the patterns of the Southern Ocean and the Indian Ocean and the edges of the Pacific, and in that larger context the dark water working, which had been calibrated for Atlantic scale, became small. A localized disruption in a very large system. Not a wall of noise anymore. A signal. Specific, traceable, placed. He read it clearly. He saw exactly what it was and where it had been put in and what its intended effect was and the specific knowledge of Atlantean dark water mechanics that its construction betrayed. He reached into it with land magic, the gold-green current, older than Atlantean law, older than the prohibition on dark water working, and took it apart. Not violently. Methodically. The way he'd taken apart that waterform construction for Mera 7 years ago, each piece in the reverse order it had been placed, until nothing remained of it but dissolved trace that the Atlantic's own circulation would break down within hours. He completed the Atlantic trial on its own terms. He held the awareness, clean now, the interference gone, for the required duration, feeling the full basin, every current and every creature and every pressure system, the largest living system on the planet holding him in its knowledge. When the Atlantic released him, its seal mark burned onto his forearm with more force than any of the others. Fifth seal. He came out of the trial ground into open water and found Mera 11 meters from the boundary, arms crossed, expression doing 17 things simultaneously. She looked at him from head to toe and then said, in Atlantean, something that translated roughly as "You're intact, good, now I'm going to kill ORM." "Not yet," Harry said. "I have 2 more trials." Mera's eyes went to his forearm. She looked at the 5 seal marks, the 5th still bright and fresh. She was quiet for a moment. "The interference," she said. "I took care of it," Harry said. "And I know what it was. I know the specific technique and the specific knowledge base it came from." He met her eyes. "When this is over, we'll have everything we need." Mera held his gaze. He could see her processing, the satisfaction of confirmation mixed with the cold anger of a protector who'd been given a reason for it. "Mediterranean and the Arctic Sea remaining," she said. "The Mediterranean tomorrow," Harry said. "I need to eat first." The Mediterranean was memory. The trial held him in a current chamber deep below the Med's floor, older even than Atlantis, a place where the ocean kept its longest records, and surrounded him with it. Not his memory. The ocean's. 10,000 years of tides and kingdoms and ships that had sailed and sunk, of coastlines that had changed shape, of civilizations that had risen and fallen while the water watched with its old, patient eyes. And in the middle of it, his own history. Not just the 7 years in Atlantis. Before. The cupboard. Privet Drive. A woman with red hair and green eyes like his own whose face he only knew from the way people said her name when they thought he couldn't hear. The shape of something that had been taken before he was old enough to hold on to it. The Mediterranean showed him grief. Not as an attack. As a truth. The ocean didn't use pain to wound you, it used it to ask whether you could carry it without letting it make you into something smaller. Harry stood in the current chamber and let the grief be there. He didn't fight it or diminish it or push it away. He felt it fully, the loss of a mother and father whose faces he held in almost no memory, the years in the cupboard, the systematic erasure of his worth that the Desleys had conducted with such thoroughness. He felt all of it, and it was real and it was heavy and it mattered. And then he felt the ocean around it. Atlantis. Mera correcting his water form with hands that were strict and careful in equal measure. Vulko setting a stack of tablets down and staying up all night to talk him through the things they found in them. Arthur sitting beside him on the terrace while the deep water moved below and not filling the silence with anything except presence. The Merrick formalization. The ward status. The title that meant belongs to the sea and to you in equal measure. He wasn't the boy from the cupboard anymore. Not because the cupboard hadn't happened, it had, it would always have happened, but because it wasn't the whole story. Maybe not even the most important part of it. He came out of the current chamber with salt on his face that wasn't from the ocean. Sixth seal. The Arctic Sea was the last one. He went in on the 7th day, near midnight in the Atlantean cycle, the alignment window down to its final hours. The Arctic Sea in the deep of a winter night was the most absolute thing Harry had ever experienced, cold and dark and silent in a way that made everything else feel temporary. Which it was, he supposed. Nearly everything was temporary. The trial was simple. Not easy. Simple. The Arctic presented him with a single question, written in pressure and current and cold, the oldest language the ocean had, why? Not why should you be king? Not why do you want this? Just, why? Harry thought about what he could say. The prophecy. The mark. The trident in its vault. The 7 years of preparation. He thought about all the good and sufficient reasons and discarded all of them because they were answers to a different question. They were about qualification. The ocean wasn't asking if he was qualified. He thought about the dying pod of ancients in the Southern Ocean. The blocked Pacific Current. The political disruption slowly fracturing the sea nations. He thought about ORM, whose genuine belief that he was protecting something was going to break the thing he loved if it wasn't addressed. He thought about the surface world he'd be walking into eventually, the wizarding world and its wars and its prophecies and whatever Voldemort was and whatever Harry was supposed to be in that story. He thought about the bioluminescent creature he'd watched from the terrace with Arthur. Things too big to fit anywhere else. The ocean is where things belong when no one wants them. He thought about a 5-year-old in a cupboard explaining to a spider why the ocean was the sky turned upside down. Because someone has to, Harry said, into the Arctic dark. And because the ocean trusted me first. The Arctic Sea received this. The cold pressed in and then, just slightly, withdrew. Not warmth, exactly. Something more specific than warmth. Acknowledgement. From the oldest of the seas, a single motion of the water, yes. The 7th seal mark burned onto his forearm. The 7 seals lit up simultaneously, all of them pulsing in the rhythm of his heartbeat, and the light they made was not blue-white but gold-green, his land magic's color, rising up through the seawater around him and turning it, for a moment, the color of sunlight on a deep forest. The ocean knew its king. He came back to the ceremony chamber to find all of Atlantis waiting. Not literally all of it, but it felt that way. The chamber was packed, every seat filled, the overflow watching through the crystal walls from the corridor beyond. Arthur stood at the front with an expression Harry had never seen on him before, something beyond pride, something that had gone past language into the body. Mara stood beside him, arms at her sides, chin up, looking like someone who had known this was going to happen and was still, now that it had, completely overwhelmed by it. Vulko stood beside the trident of the 7 seas. It was out of the vault. Brought up and mounted on a stand before the ceremony chamber's central dais. It was glowing, all of it, full length, with that blue-black light that was its particular frequency, and the glow had been visible from the moment Harry cleared the final trial corridor. The whole city had been able to see it. He walked through the chamber. The crowd parted. Not because he commanded it, because he moved like someone who knew where he was going and the space around him had the good sense to agree. He stopped in front of the trident. Niamh was beside it. She looked at him with those ancient eyes and said, in the oldest Atlantean, 7 seas. 7 seals. 1 candidate. She paused. Are you what the ocean says you are? Harry looked at the trident. At its dark metal and its 3 tines and its 10,000 years of waiting. He looked at the 7 seal marks on his arm, still warm, still fresh. He looked at Arthur, and at Mara, and at Vulko. He looked at ORM, who was standing in the council section with his jaw set and his eyes hard and his whole bearing the rigid line of someone who had lost something and was already planning what to do about it. Harry turned back to the trident. He picked it up. The reaction was instantaneous and complete. Every line of the old writing in the chamber lit up, walls, ceiling, floor, the accumulated inscriptions of 10,000 years blazing all at once, a cascade of acknowledgement that moved through the stone of the palace like a wave through water. The trident in his hand blazed with it, gold-green and blue-white intertwined, his 2 magics running together in the metal like they'd been waiting for exactly this vessel. The ocean registered it. Outside the palace, 3 miles of deep Atlantic water shifted. The current that ran through Atlantis, the deep feed that kept the city alive, surged once, strongly, and then settled into a new pattern. Cleaner. More coherent. Like a heart that had been beating slightly arrhythmically for 10,000 years finding its proper rhythm. Niamh spoke the formal words of confirmation. Harry barely heard them. He was holding the trident and feeling the whole ocean through it, all 7 seas, every current and pressure and living thing, a vast and intricate system that he could feel at the edges of his awareness like a map he'd always known was there but was only now fully unrolled. When Niam finished, the chamber was very quiet. Harry turned to face them all. He wasn't performing. He wasn't projecting. He was simply present, completely, clearly, in exactly the way that large and certain things are present. "I know about the interference in the Atlantic trial," he said, in a voice that carried to every corner of the chamber without being raised. He held ORM's eyes. The dark water working. The specific technique. The specific knowledge base. He paused. "I'm not going to move on it today. Or this week. I want you to understand why, because I believe in process, and because I think you, specifically, are someone who respects process when it serves something you believe in." He kept his voice even. Factual. Not angry. "I'm also asking you to consider whether what you believe in is actually what you're serving. Because the thing you love is more important than the argument." The chamber was absolutely still. ORM looked back at him. His expression was locked down, controlled, but something behind it was moving, something that had been disturbed. "Think about it," Harry said. Simply. And looked away, which was, in its own way, the most powerful thing he'd done in that room. He looked at Arthur, whose expression had gone past language entirely. Arthur looked back at him, and what was on his face was not complicated at all, it was just love, uncomplicated and absolute, the way the ocean loved the things it had chosen. Harry smiled. Small and real and entirely his own. The trident pulsed in his hand. The Wizard King of 7 Seas had arrived. Chapter 4, The Surface World Blinks. First, the letter arrived on a Wednesday. Not through the post, nothing so mundane. It came through a merfolk intermediary, passed along a chain of diplomatic contacts that had been trying to locate Harry Potter for 7 years with increasing desperation. The merfolk of the North Atlantic had been officially neutral on the matter, but neutrality was expensive to maintain when Atlantis started making formal requests through proper channels, and Atlantis had been making formal requests through proper channels since Harry turned 10. The letter was sealed with purple wax and stamped with a crest Harry didn't recognize, an owl perched on a book, a wand, a star. It was addressed in green ink to Mr. H. Potter, Ward of the Royal House of Atlantis, the Deep Palace, Atlantic Ocean. The handwriting was precise and slightly theatrical. Harry read it twice, sitting cross-legged on the terrace where he and Arthur had their best conversations, with the trident resting beside him and the deep ocean doing its patient work below. Then he set it down and looked at Volko. "They want me at school." "So it appears," Volko said. He'd already read it, obviously. He'd also, Harry knew, read the 11 previous letters that had been intercepted at various points in the diplomatic chain over the past 2 years, each one increasingly formal and increasingly urgent in ways that tried very hard not to look urgent. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Harry read from the letter. Founded 990 AD. 4 houses. 7 years. Train in magical theory and practice in preparation for, he turned the page, integration into Wizarding Society. He set it down again. "They've been looking for me since I was 5. "Since before you were 5, Volko said. "The surface wizarding world has had plans for you since you were approximately 15 months old." "Tell me." Volko had been telling him, in pieces, over the past 3 years, calibrating the delivery to what Harry was ready to receive and what the available intelligence actually supported. He laid it out now in full: Voldemort, the prophecy, the night in Godric's Hollow, the scar, the defeat of a dark wizard that the surface world had been celebrating for a decade while the subject of that defeat was locked in a cupboard under the stairs. Harry listened without interrupting. He had most of it already, assembled from Volko's previous installments and his own research through the surface-facing sections of the Atlantean diplomatic archives. But hearing it in complete sequence was different from having the pieces. When Volko finished, Harry was quiet for a moment. "They wanted me to grow up not knowing any of this," he said. The theory, as best we can reconstruct it, was that an ordinary upbringing would prevent the kind of arrogance that apparently, they wanted a weapon that didn't know it was a weapon, Harry said. Not bitterly. Just clearly, in the tone he used when identifying the logic of an opponent's move. Someone who would walk into a fight without understanding their own position in it. He looked at the letter. The headmaster. Dumbledore. He's the architect of this. Almost certainly. And he still wants me at Hogwarts. He very much wants you at Hogwarts, Volko said. The letters have become progressively more, there's a word in surface English. Pointed. They have become progressively more pointed. The last three reference your legal obligation to wizarding education under surface magical law. Harry's mouth curved slightly. Does surface magical law have jurisdiction over a ward of the Atlantean royal house? It does not, Volko said, with quiet satisfaction. Harry picked the letter up again and read the signature at the bottom. Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, Headmaster, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Supreme Mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards, Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot. He noted the deliberate arrangement of titles, each one placed to imply authority in a different direction. It was, he had to admit, well constructed. The letter itself was warm and personable and full of the specific kind of avuncular wisdom that was designed to make the reader feel simultaneously chosen and guided. It was excellent work. It would have been devastating on a 12-year-old who didn't know better. I want to meet him, Harry said. Volko blinked. You want to go to Hogwarts? I want to meet Dumbledore, Harry said. And I'm curious about the school. There's a whole magical tradition I've been working around the edges of for 7 years without proper access to it. He set the letter down. The land magic in me has developed without surface wizarding instruction. I want to know what it looks like from that tradition's perspective. He paused. And Voldemort is still out there. Diminished, but not gone. Whatever he's planning, I'd rather see the board before he starts moving pieces. Volko looked at him steadily. You understand that Dumbledore will attempt to manage this situation from the moment you arrive. I know. He will have plans for you. Specific plans. About your role in the war he sees coming. I know. He is not a bad man. But he is a man who has decided that the ends justify considerable means. I know that too, Harry said. Which is why I'm going on my terms. He picked up the letter. Write him back. Tell him I accept the invitation to Hogwarts, beginning the autumn term. Tell him I'll be arriving on the 1st of September with my guardian. Volko's eyebrow went up. Arthur is coming to Hogwarts. Arthur would never forgive me if I didn't ask him, Harry said, which was true and also a deflection of the more tactical reason, which was that Dumbledore operating on the assumption that Harry was alone on the surface was a significant advantage worth preserving. Arthur's reaction to the letter was characteristically unambiguous. He read it, set it down, picked it up, read it again, and said, No. That's not how this works, Harry said. You're 12. You started ruling Atlantis when you were, that was different. Because it was you? Arthur gave him the look. Harry gave it back. They had been having versions of this exchange for 3 years, Arthur's protectiveness moving in a constant negotiation with his genuine respect for Harry's judgment, and Harry's patience with the protectiveness grounded in genuine affection for the man doing the protecting. The surface wizarding world has been trying to locate you for 7 years, Arthur said. A dark wizard who tried to kill you as an infant may or may not be building toward a return. The headmaster of the school that wants to educate you has been maneuvering toward getting you into his proximity since before you could walk. And you want to just, go. Not just go, Harry said. Go with full knowledge of all of that, on my own timeline, through channels I control. He leaned forward slightly. Arthur. If I don't go now, on my terms, they eventually find a way to bring this to us. Voldemort's return, whatever form it takes, will eventually interact with the ocean. With Atlantis. I'd rather fight that battle on ground I've chosen. Arthur stared at the letter. His jaw was doing its holding things down thing. I'll come with you, he said, finally. To meet the headmaster. I was counting on it, Harry said. And you're coming back here for holidays. Obviously. And if anything, Arthur. Harry's voice was even and warm. I'll be fine. Arthur looked at him. At the mark on his hand. At the 12-year-old who had passed 7 ancient sea trials and faced down an ocean's worth of challenges and had never once, in 7 years, given Arthur a genuine reason to doubt him. I know, Arthur said, which cost him something, and meant a great deal because of it. Mara's response was more surgical. She sat across from Harry in the training room after he told her, arms crossed, eyes doing the thing where they assessed 17 variables simultaneously, and said, "What do you need from me before you go?" Harry looked at her. He felt the warmth of it, that specific, precise care that never softened its edges but was no less real for that. Tell me about the surface wizarding combat tradition, he said. What do you know? Some, she said. Vulko has more. But the fundamentals, they work through a wand, a channeling tool. The magic is in the caster but the wand focuses and directs it. Without a wand, surface wizards are significantly compromised. I don't use a wand. No. Your land magic is fully integrated, you don't need a physical channel. That will be disorienting for people who understand magic through the wand framework. She uncrossed her arms. They'll tell you that you need one. That magic doesn't work properly without one. That whatever you're doing is irregular or insufficiently trained. And it's not true. It's true for them. It won't be true for you. She looked at him steadily. Don't let them diminish your understanding of your own power to make themselves more comfortable with it. Harry nodded. This was the essential Mara lesson, the one she'd been teaching in various forms for 7 years. Not be arrogant. Not dismiss other people's expertise. But, know your own ground and don't surrender it. I'll write, he said. Frequently. You'd better, she said. Then, because she was Mara and she never let a moment get too soft without balancing it, your water manipulation has been getting lazy on the left side rotation. Fix that before September. It has not, it has, she said, and stood up and left the room in a way that closed the subject. Harry looked after her. He pressed his lips together to keep the smile manageable. The shopping trip to Diagon Alley was Arthur's idea, which surprised Harry until Arthur explained that he had a contact, a surface world lawyer who handled the interface between certain unusual clients and mundane institutions, who could arrange access to the Wizarding World's commercial district without going through official channels. You have a surface lawyer, Harry said. I have a surface lawyer, Arthur confirmed. Don't ask. Diagon Alley was, Harry's first impression, stepping through the leaky cauldron's back courtyard while Arthur tapped the bricks in the sequence the lawyer had texted him, chaotic and fascinating and loud in the way of places that had been doing the same thing for hundreds of years and were entirely comfortable with it. He attracted attention. He was aware of it from the moment they cleared the entrance arch, heads turning, the particular quality of recognition that moved through a crowd when it saw something it had been waiting for. He'd developed, over 7 years of navigating Atlantean politics, a comprehensive awareness of being watched, and what he felt in Diagon Alley was layered and complex, curiosity, some wariness, something that felt uncomfortably close to reverence, and underneath all of it a kind of collective need that made his skin tighten. They wanted him to be something specific. He could feel the shape of the expectation like a current's direction. He bought robes at Madame Malkin's, standard school uniform, though Malkin herself kept pausing in the measuring to look at the mark on his hand with barely concealed fascination. He got his books at Flourish and Blots. He visited the apothecary and bought potion supplies with the detached efficiency of someone who had been managing complex chemical reactions underwater for years and found surface world potion theory beginner level but interesting. He bought an owl at Elops, a small tawny one who looked at him with the assessing intelligence of something that had met a lot of people and formed opinions about most of them. The owl climbed onto his finger immediately and showed no interest in leaving. Harry named her Tide. The wand shop was last. Ollivander's was narrow and overstuffed with boxes, and Ollivander himself was the kind of person who paid absolute attention to things and whose absolute attention had a slightly unnerving quality, like being watched by something that was mostly human but had made some specific additional choices. He looked at Harry's hand for a long time before he said anything. "The mark," he said. "I've read about that. I wasn't certain I'd live to see one. Can I still use a wand?" Harry asked. "With the land magic integrated the way it is?" Ollivander tipped his head. "Interesting question. Let's find out." He began pulling boxes. The process was not quick, far less quick than his usual work, Harry could tell, though he had nothing to compare it to except Ollivander's increasing expression of professional fascination as wand after wand declined to respond, or responded in ways that seemed to surprise him. "You're not channeling," Ollivander said, after the 12th attempt. "You're not channeling the magic through the wand. The magic is treating the wand as a partner, not a tool. Is that a problem?" "For a conventional wand, yes. The conventional wand wants to be the dominant element in the relationship." He paused. Went to the very back of the shop. Came back with a box that he set on the counter and opened with a different quality of attention. Holly and phoenix feather. 11 inches. "This one has been waiting a long time." Harry picked it up. The reaction was not what the books described, not warmth and sparks and a gust of wind. It was quieter than that. The wand and the land magic found each other and settled into an arrangement that felt not like activation but like recognition. Two old things acknowledging each other. Gold-green light moved up the wand from handle to tip and held there, steady. Ollivander looked at it. He looked at Harry. His expression was not the showman's delight of a successful match but something more private. "Curious," he said softly. "The phoenix whose feather is in that wand gave one other feather. One other wand." He looked at the mark on Harry's hand, then at the scar on his forehead. "I think you know whose." "Yes," Harry said. "And you're not afraid of that?" "No," Harry said. He set a small stack of Atlantean exchanged galleons on the counter. "Thank you." Ollivander watched him leave with the expression of someone who had been in his shop for 70 years and had just had an entirely new experience in it. Arthur waited outside. He fell into step beside Harry as they moved back up Diagon Alley toward the exit, and they walked in the companionable silence that was one of their best things. "Man in the robe shop recognized you," Arthur said. "I know. Several people did. One of them sent a message, I saw it go. Probably to the Ministry or to Dumbledore." "Also expected," Harry said. "They know I'm coming now." "That's fine. It's better than them being surprised." Arthur looked sideways at him. "You're not nervous at all, are you?" Harry thought about this honestly. "Not about the school," he said. "Not about Dumbledore or the Ministry or any of it." He paused. "A little about the people. The students." He held Tide on his wrist and the owl looked up at him with that assessing expression. "I've been around politics and soldiers and ancient ocean priests my whole life. Normal 12-year-olds are a different thing." Arthur laughed, a real one, startled out of him. "You're worried about other children. They'll have context I don't. Friends they've had since they were small. In-jokes and histories and shared references." Harry looked ahead. "I'll be starting in the middle of a story everyone else knows." "You started in the middle of a story in Atlantis," Arthur said. "You were fine." "Atlantis had you," Harry said, simply. Arthur was quiet for a moment. Then he put a hand briefly on Harry's shoulder, the same easy way he always did, nothing complicated, just present. "You've got me on this one too," he said. "Even from 600 fathoms down." September 1st arrived the way important days tended to, too quickly and then all at once. Platform 9 3/4 was the first genuinely new experience Harry had had in several years, and he took it seriously. The platform was loud and emotional and packed with the specific kind of chaos that came from 100 families all saying goodbye at the same time. He moved through it with the trained awareness of someone who spent a lot of time in environments where knowing where everyone was mattered. He was stared at consistently. People recognized him, either from reputation or from the scar or from the mark on his hand, which had been the subject of a short but intensely speculative article in the Daily Prophet 2 weeks after the Diagon Alley trip. He received the stares with equanimity and moved through them without breaking stride. Arthur had come as far as the platform entrance. The train was a surface world thing, and his presence on the platform would more actions write the next chapter now. Chapter 5, The Surface World's Reckoning. The Hogwarts Express left King's Cross at 11 sharp, and Harry found a compartment near the back of the train because he wanted to see the countryside and because experience had taught him that the back of things was generally quieter than the front. He lasted about 4 minutes before the compartment door slid open. The boy who looked in had red hair and a smudge of something on his nose and the open, slightly nervous expression of someone who was hoping very much that this particular seat was available. He looked at Harry. He looked at tied on the luggage rack. He looked at the mark on Harry's hand, which was visible because Harry had stopped covering it approximately 5 years ago when he decided that things you were embarrassed about tended to become weaknesses. Is it, can I? The boy pointed at the empty seats. Go ahead, Harry said. The boy came in and sat down and then spent about 30 seconds deciding something, after which he appeared to decide it and said, with the bluntness of someone who had decided beating around the bush was inefficient, "You're Harry Potter." "I am," Harry said. "I'm Ron. Ron Weasley." He stuck out his hand. Harry shook it. Ron looked at their joined hands for a moment, at the mark, and then let go and sat back. "My mum knew your mum, actually. Not well, but she cried when she heard you'd been found." He paused. "When you came back, I mean. From, wherever." "Atlantis," Harry said. Ron blinked. "Right. Yeah." He processed this. "So it's real. Atlantis is actually real." "Very much so. My brother Fred said it was made up. I told him it wasn't. He owes me 2 sickles." Ron looked pleased about this. Then, with the careful tone of someone asking something he'd been wondering for a while, "What's it like down there?" Harry considered how to answer that. The question was deceptively large. "Imagine a city that's been growing for 10,000 years, he said, and every part of it was built by people who understood the ocean well enough to make it part of the architecture. And then imagine living in it while the ocean is paying attention to you." Ron stared at him. "That's mental," he said. "In a good way. In a very good way." They talked for an hour and a half with the ease of people who had compatible rhythms. Ron asked questions with the unself-conscious enthusiasm of genuine curiosity, and Harry answered them honestly, which was different from how most people had treated Ron in his life, he gathered, from the slightly surprised quality of his attention. Ron was perceptive in the way of people who had spent a lot of time in large families learning to read rooms quickly. He was also funny, in the dry and slightly chaotic way of people who had grown up outnumbered and learned to find humor as a survival mechanism. Harry liked him. Simply and immediately, without qualification. The compartment door opened again an hour in, and this time it was a girl with a great deal of bushy brown hair and the expression of someone who had come to do a job and found the situation more interesting than expected. She looked at Harry the way Harry looked at new subjects, scanning, cataloging, forming an initial hypothesis she was already preparing to test. "You're Harry Potter," she said. "So people keep telling me," Harry said. "I'm Hermione Granger. I've read about you, about what was known about you, which wasn't much until the Prophet article." She came in and sat down without waiting to be invited, which Harry appreciated as an approach. "The mark on your hand is the Tidewarden's mark from Atlantean deep history. 3rd Dynasty records, pre-linguistic shift." She paused. I wasn't sure I was reading it correctly. Harry held up his hand. Hermione leaned forward and studied it with the focused intensity of someone who had been waiting a long time to verify a theory. It's correct, Harry said. The Wizard King prophecy is real, she said. Not a question. Very much so. Hermione sat back. She looked like someone who had just had a very good day. I've so many questions, she said. I know, Harry said. Ask them. She did. They were excellent questions, precise, well-researched, asking about things she'd clearly already thought through rather than reflexive surface-level curiosity. Harry answered them with the same quality of engagement, and within 20 minutes the three of them were in the middle of a conversation about the relationship between Atlantean water magic and surface wizarding theory that Ron was following about 60% of but contributing to with occasional left-field observations that twice cut through a complicated theoretical point more cleanly than either Harry or Hermione had managed. By the time the train began its approach to Hogsmeade Station, something had been established between the three of them that didn't have a name yet but had the structural integrity of something that was going to last. Hogwarts at night, across the Black Lake, lit gold from within. Harry looked at it from the bow of a first-year boat and felt something he hadn't expected. Not intimidation. Not indifference. Something between wonder and recognition, the way Atlantis had felt from half a mile out on the first approach. A large thing that had been doing important work for a very long time and knew it. He filed that observation away and stepped out of the boat. The castle's entrance was presided over by a tall witch with severe features and the specific kind of authority that doesn't need to announce itself, it's simply present in the room and everything adjusts accordingly. Harry recognized the type. Mara had the same quality, though expressed differently. He liked it immediately. Professor McGonagall, Hermione murmured beside him. McGonagall's eyes moved through the crowd of first-years with the efficiency of someone who had done this a great many times, cataloging, assessing. They landed on Harry and held for a moment, not the wide-eyed recognition he'd been getting from people all day, but something more considered. She looked at the mark on his hand. Her expression made a small, controlled movement. Mr. Potter, she said, when she reached him in the line of names she was checking. The headmaster would like to speak with you before the sorting. If you'll follow me. Of course, Harry said pleasantly. Ron shot him a look. Hermione shot him a different look. Harry gave them both the small nod that meant I'm fine, don't worry, and followed McGonagall through a side corridor while the other first-years were held in the anteroom. Dumbledore's office was circular and full of the particular kind of deliberate clutter that was actually very carefully arranged, every object placed to create an impression of benign eccentricity while simultaneously demonstrating the range and depth of the occupant's experience and knowledge. Harry catalogued it in the 10 seconds between entering and being invited to sit down. The headmaster himself was, Harry had to acknowledge, exactly as described in every piece of intelligence Volko had assembled about him. Tall, silver-haired, robes of deep blue, half-moon glasses that he looked over rather than through. The eyes behind those glasses were very sharp and very kind in equal measure, and the combination was the most sophisticated version of the approach Harry had seen, the kindness disarmed, and the sharpness assessed under its cover. Harry, he said, warmly, as though they were continuing a conversation rather than beginning one. How wonderful that you're here. Please, sit. Harry sat. He kept his hands visible on the arms of the chair, not deliberately, just because it was a habit from years of Atlantean council rooms where concealment was always noted. I imagine you have questions, Dumbledore said. You've had quite an extraordinary 7 years. I do have questions, Harry said. But I suspect you have more. The faintest adjustment in Dumbledore's expression, so small that most people would have missed it entirely. He'd been expecting a 12-year-old shaped by isolation and unfamiliarity, however unusual his recent history. He was recalibrating. Shall we exchange them, then? Dumbledore said, and his voice had shifted almost imperceptibly, warmer in a different way, the way it got when he was engaging with someone he decided was worth engaging with fully. You want to know who I am now, Harry said. Whether the person sitting in front of you is who you needed me to be. A pause. You're more direct than I expected. I find it saves time. Harry leaned back slightly in the chair. I know about the prophecy. I know about my parents. I know about the night in Godric's Hollow and what the scar means and the connection it creates. He paused. I know about your theory regarding my upbringing on the surface. The ordinary childhood. The protection through ignorance. Dumbledore was very still. I don't think it was malicious, Harry said. I think you made the decision you believed was right, with the information you had, for reasons that were genuinely about protection. I think you're someone who has been playing a very long game for very good reasons and has gotten comfortable making decisions for other people inside that game. He held the headmaster's eyes. I'm not angry. But I'm not going to be managed. The silence in the circular office was very clean. A portrait on the wall had stopped pretending to be asleep. The silver instruments on their shelves had gone quiet. Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment. Then something in his expression settled, not defeat, not entirely, but a kind of acknowledgement that the map he'd been using had just been substantially revised. The Wizard King of Seven Seas, he said softly. I read Volko's translation of the Atlantean records when they were shared through the International Confederation 6 months ago. He paused. I underestimated what it meant. Most people do, Harry said. Until they don't. Voldemort, Dumbledore said, directly. He's not gone. You know this. I know this. He will return. The question is when and in what form. And when he does, I'll be part of it, Harry said. The prophecy means I'm part of it regardless of what either of us prefers. He looked at the headmaster evenly. But I'll be part of it as myself, not as whoever it would have been more convenient for me to become. He paused. We can work together, or we can work at cross purposes. I'd strongly prefer the former. Dumbledore looked at him with an expression that Harry couldn't fully read. It had too many layers, moving too quickly. Surprise, definitely. Reassessment. Something that might have been relief, which was interesting. And underneath all of it, something that might have been the closest thing to humility that a man of Dumbledore's certainty could manage. You remind me, Dumbledore said quietly, of your mother. She also had a gift for making people feel they'd been seen clearly for the first time. Harry held very still inside. Outwardly he was calm. Tell me about her sometime, he said. When there's more time than tonight. I'd like that, Dumbledore said, and meant it. They reached an understanding in that office, not a full alliance, not a complete disclosure, but a framework. Dumbledore would not work around Harry. Harry would keep Dumbledore informed of things that affected the wider conflict. The details would be negotiated as they arose. It was, Harry thought, about as good as a first negotiation with someone this sophisticated could get. The sorting hat was old and looked at and smelled of it, something between old parchment and long memory. When it was placed on Harry's head, it went very quiet for a long moment, which apparently it did not usually do. Harry felt it examining him. A consciousness working through his layers, not aggressively, but thoroughly, in the way of something that had been doing its job for 1,000 years and took it seriously. Well, it said, inside his head, in a voice like paper turning. This is unusual. I've heard that a lot today, Harry said, quietly enough that only the hat caught it. You're not like the ones I usually see. There are more rooms in here than most people have. And Atlantis. Remarkable. A pause. You could be anything, you know. Truly. The courage is real. The loyalty. The ambition is there too, more than most who sit in that chair, and they usually have a great deal of it. And the mind. Another pause. But there's something underneath all of it that isn't in the categories. What is it? Harry asked, genuinely curious. Responsibility, the hat said, as if it surprised itself. Not duty, that's a different thing. Responsibility. The acceptance of things not because they're required but because they're yours. It was quiet for a moment. Where do you want to go? Where do you think I belong? Harry asked. That question, the hat said, with something that sounded like it might be the hat equivalent of a smile, is exactly the right one. Gryffindor. The table to the left erupted. Harry walked to it and sat down, and someone put a plate in front of him, and Ron appeared 2 seats down and gave him a delighted grin, and Hermione appeared across from him and looked satisfied, as if she'd predicted this and was pleased to be confirmed. The hat moved on to the next student. Harry looked up at the staff table. Dumbledore was watching him with that layered expression. McGonagall was watching him with something that looked like professional assessment shifting toward approval. There was a man in purple turban at the end of the table who was watching him with a quality of attention that was different from everyone else's, more urgent, somehow. More hungry. Harry filed it away. His first week at Hogwarts taught him 3 things about the surface wizarding world that Vulko's research hadn't fully conveyed. The first was that fame was a specific kind of isolation. Every person he met came preloaded with a version of him, the tragic infant, the miraculous survivor, the boy who should have been here all along and had instead been somewhere impossible and come back changed. None of those versions were him. They were all affectionate, which made it more disorienting rather than less. Dislike he could navigate. Affection built on fiction was more complicated. Ron and Hermione were exceptions. Ron because he was constitutionally more interested in who Harry actually was than in who he was supposed to be, and Hermione because she'd already done enough research to know that the official versions were incomplete and was more interested in the reality. The second thing was wand work, which was fascinating. Not because it was more powerful than what he could do, it wasn't, at first-year level, but because of its structure. Surface wizarding magic through a wand was essentially a conversation between the caster's will, the spell's linguistic pattern, and the wand's channeling properties. Compact, precise, highly codified. 7 years of developing magic in partnership with the ocean had given Harry something fundamentally different, broader in scale, more expensive in terms of focus required, but operating without the ceiling that the wand framework created. The 2 systems were not opposed. They were, Harry was discovering, complementary in ways that surface magical theory hadn't mapped because no one had had access to both simultaneously. He was quiet about this in class. Not hiding it, concealment wasn't something he had any interest in, but not performing it either. When Flitwick asked for Wingardium Leviosa in the first charms lesson, Harry produced a clean levitation charm that was technically correct and entirely unremarkable. He was more interested in understanding the spell's structure than in demonstrating his range, and the understanding required doing it at the learning level first. Hermione noticed. She was, Harry was discovering, virtually impossible to hide things from, which was not a problem so much as an interesting feature of her attention. "You're doing them correctly," she said after charms, "but you're working backwards from the effect to understand the mechanism. Most students work forwards from the instruction." "Is that wrong?" Harry asked. "No," she said. "It's just, unusual. You already know how to produce the effect through a different pathway, so you're reverse engineering the surface world method to understand why it works the way it does." She paused. "Am I wrong?" "No," Harry said. Hermione looked pleased in the specific way she looked pleased when a hypothesis was confirmed. "The integration of the 2 systems must be extraordinary," she said. "It's getting there," Harry said. "I'm still mapping it." The third thing the first week taught him was Professor Quirrell, and this was less a lesson than a developing awareness that sharpened incrementally over several days. The defense against the dark arts professor was, technically, unremarkable, a nervous man in a purple turban with a stammer that came and went and a teaching style that managed to be both anxious and evasive. The students found him slightly ridiculous. Harry found him very interesting. The quality of attention he'd noticed at the sorting feast was a consistent feature of every interaction with Quirrell. It was focused on Harry specifically, with an urgency and hunger that was completely out of proportion to the context. And underneath it, Harry became sure of this by Thursday of the first week, was something else. Something old and wrong and purposeful, like dark water underneath a surface that was pretending to be still. He'd felt something like it once, at the edge of the deep Atlantic during a training exercise. Something massive and cold and not friendly, moving at the boundary of the trial ground. He'd recognized it as a kind of power that was not interested in partnership, that only wanted to use and be fed. He said nothing yet. He watched. And he made sure that whatever Quirrell was watching for, what he was seeing when he watched Harry was as unrevealing as possible. The troll happened on Halloween. Harry had been at Hogwarts for 2 months, and he'd spent most of those 2 months doing 3 things simultaneously, learning the surface wizarding tradition at its own pace, building genuine friendships with Ron and Hermione that had none of the political infrastructure of Atlantean relationships, and tracking the persistent wrong note that was Quirrell's presence in the school. The troll was, on its own terms, a straightforward problem, a 12-foot mountain troll let loose in the dungeons during the Halloween feast, which sent the school into the specific kind of chaos that comes from a few hundred people trying to move quickly in the same space with insufficient information. Students were evacuated to dormitories. Prefects shouted. Professors moved with purpose through the crowds. Harry moved in a different direction. He knew before Hermione was reported missing that she was going to be the problem. She'd left the feast upset earlier in the evening, retreating to the girls' bathroom on the 2nd floor after overhearing Ron make a thoughtless remark about her, and she hadn't come back. When the troll's location was confirmed as the 2nd floor corridor, Harry was already moving. Ron caught up with him on the first landing. "Where are you, Hermione?" Harry said. Ron didn't argue. He just ran. They found the troll in the 2nd floor bathroom. It had found Hermione first. She was against the far wall, not yet hurt but cornered, the troll raising a club that was mostly repurposed stone pillar over its head with the focused enthusiasm of something that had found a small and stationary target. The troll was enormous. It smelled terrible. It turned its tiny eyes toward Harry and Ron when they came through the door and made the kind of sound that suggested its decision-making process was not sophisticated. Harry looked at the troll the way he looked at everything, for 1 second, completely, mapping the relevant facts. The bathroom was enclosed. The troll was between them and Hermione. The ceiling was 12 feet, enough room. The troll's primary threat was the club. Its balance was poor due to the club's weight shifting its center of gravity forward. He raised his left hand, not the wand hand, the marked hand, and let the water magic go. Every pipe in the bathroom, sinks, toilets, the whole system, responded. Water came out of them not as a flow but as a directed force, hitting the troll from 3 sides simultaneously with the flat pressure of a deep water current that Harry had been generating for practice since he was 6. The troll staggered. The club swung wide. The stone pillar end hit the ceiling and shattered, sending chunks of masonry across the bathroom while the troll flailed for balance it didn't have. Harry stepped aside from a falling ceiling chunk without looking at it, keeping his attention on the troll, and redirected the water pressure in a single concentrated stream at the troll's ankles. It went down. It hit the bathroom floor with an impact that registered in the walls. The floor cracked. The troll lay still, not dead, just dramatically unconscious, in the way of things that had been hit harder than their nervous systems could process without briefly switching off. Hermione had her back against the wall. She was staring at Harry. Ron was in the doorway with a very wide expression. The bathroom was approximately 3 inches deep in water. "Are you hurt?" Harry asked Hermione. "No," she said. She looked at the troll. At the water. At the cracked floor. No. She swallowed. "You didn't use your wand." "I know," Harry said. He let the water pressure ease. The pipes sighed back to normal flow. "You just, with your hand, the water magic is faster for physical force management," Harry said. "Wand spells have a syntax delay. This situation didn't have room for syntax delay." Hermione stared at him. "Are you actually okay?" Harry said. "Yes," she said, and then immediately started crying, which she clearly hadn't intended to do and was furious about, which was so entirely Hermione that Harry felt a rush of affection for her that was completely uncomplicated. Ron crossed the bathroom and patted her shoulder with the awkward but genuine warmth of someone who hadn't known he was going to do that until he did. "You're fine," he said. "Giant troll, unconscious, everything's great." He looked at Harry. "You hit a troll with plumbing." "Effectively," Harry said. "That's the most brilliant thing I've ever seen," Ron said, with total sincerity. The professors arrived approximately 90 seconds after the troll went down, McGonagall first, then Snape, then Quirrell. Snape looked at the troll and at Harry with an expression that contained several things at once. McGonagall looked at the troll and then at Harry and then began a sentence about rule-breaking that clearly wanted to go in one direction and kept being redirected by the evidence. Quirrell looked at Harry with that specific urgent hunger, and also, Harry noted this carefully, with something that might have been measuring. Not surprise. Not alarm. Calculation. "The troll was already down when we arrived," Hermione said. Her voice was perfectly steady now. Harry dealt with it. "With water magic," McGonagall said, noting the flooded bathroom. "Among other things," Harry said. McGonagall looked at him for a long moment. Then she gave 10 points to Gryffindor and told them all firmly to return to their dormitory, and they went, leaving the professors and the unconscious troll. In the corridor, out of earshot, Ron grabbed Harry's arm. 10 points, he said. "You knocked out a mountain troll and she gave us 10 points. She couldn't very well give us more for breaking the rules," Hermione said, already composed again. "The fact that the rule-breaking had good outcomes doesn't retroactively make it policy." "I think it was worth more than 10 points, Ron muttered. "You didn't do anything," Hermione said. "I ran alongside him." Harry laughed, startled, real, the kind that came out before he could organize it. Both of them looked at him with expressions that had the particular warm quality of people who were pleased to have caused something good in someone they cared about. He hadn't laughed like that in a long time. Not because his life in Atlantis had been unhappy, it had been the opposite. But Atlantean humor was drier and more referential, and Arthur and Mara and Vulko were people he loved, but they were adults who had always treated him with a specific kind of seriousness that was its own form of respect. This was different. This was just being 12 with two other 12-year-olds and finding something funny. He filed this away too. In a different place from the tactical observations. A place he was beginning to understand was its own kind of important. November brought Quidditch. Harry made the Gryffindor team in the second week of term, which broke about 14 different rules about first years on teams, but McGonagall had watched him fly during a lesson and gone directly to the team captain with the expression of someone who has made a pragmatic decision. Harry on a broom was comfortable. Familiar in the same way the ocean was familiar, the three-dimensional awareness of space and movement and the precise calibration of momentum that he'd been developing in deep water applied without translation to aerial navigation. He was fast. Significantly. Not just technically competent but intuitively fast, making adjustments and changes of direction with the economy of motion that came from years of moving through a medium that punished waste. The first match was against Slytherin on a grey November morning. Harry played Seeker and spent most of the match in the high airspace above the game, doing what Seekers did, tracking, waiting, reading the chaotic pattern of the game below for the one specific thing that mattered. He found the snitch in the 43rd minute, a gold glint moving against the Slytherin goal posts. He went for it cleanly. The Slytherin Seeker saw it at the same moment and went for it from the other direction. What happened next was brief and decisive. Harry put his broom at an angle that used the wind rather than fought it and covered the distance in the time it took the Slytherin to cover half of his. He caught the snitch with his right hand, the wand hand, and the match was over. The Gryffindor stand erupted. Ron's voice was audible above the general noise, which was an achievement. Hermione, who had read the rules specifically to understand what she was watching, had her hands over her mouth with an expression of someone who had become significantly more invested in Quidditch than she'd expected to. In the changing rooms after, Oliver Wood, the team captain, who had approximately the relationship with Quidditch that Hermione had with books, shook Harry's hand with the fervency of the genuinely converted. 7 weeks, he said. 7 weeks and you flew like that. The ocean's good preparation, Harry said. Oliver considered this with the gravity of someone for whom any information that related to flying was potentially sacred. We're going to win the cup, he said. We're absolutely going to win the cup. Yes, Harry said, because they were. December arrived in Hogwarts the way it arrived everywhere, all at once, the castle dressed in frost and moving toward the long dark. Most students went home for Christmas. Harry stayed, along with Ron and a handful of others. He wrote to Mara. He wrote to Volko. He wrote to Arthur, long letters, proper ones, not the summary updates he sent weekly but the kind of letters that had context and texture, that described things because the describing was its own kind of connection across 600 fathoms of Atlantic water. Arthur wrote back. His letters were, Arthur in prose, which was a specific and wonderful thing, direct, warm, occasionally funny in the way of someone who'd spent too long around people who found formality useful and had developed a mild allergy to it. He mentioned that ORM had been quiet, which both of them understood as the specific kind of quiet that preceded movement. He mentioned that Mara had redesigned the third-level water training sequence, which Harry understood as I miss training with you and Mara won't say that directly. He mentioned that Volko was compiling a comparative analysis of surface wizarding combat theory against Atlantean offensive waterwork, which Harry understood as Volko is worried and channeling it into research. Harry held the letters for a while after reading them, alone in the Gryffindor common room while the fire made gold of everything. He'd told Arthur he'd be fine. He was fine. But fine had a different texture here than it did in Atlantis, thinner, somehow, like light through water instead of light in it. He was building something here, with Ron and Hermione, something he hadn't known he needed. But it didn't replace what he had in the deep. He thought about Quirrell. He'd spent 3 months watching and mapping the wrong note in the defense professor and he had a clear picture now. Whatever was underneath Quirrell, whatever old and hungry darkness was wearing him, it was focused on something specific in the school. Not on Harry, or not primarily on Harry. On something else, something it wanted badly enough to be patient about. The Philosopher's Stone. He'd pieced it together from fragments, a vault break-in at Gringotts the summer before, the vault empty, the same day Hagrid was at the bank on Dumbledore's orders. Something had been moved from the bank to the school. Something important enough to be stored under significant protection. Something that, if you were a dark power looking to return to full strength, would be exactly what you needed. He told Hermione over Christmas break, because she was the right person for this kind of problem. She'd read everything relevant before he'd finished explaining, and her expression moved through surprise, rapid calculation, and focused determination in approximately 4 seconds. The Philosopher's Stone, she said. Nicholas Flamel. That's my thinking. The protections, we should figure out what they are. Not to circumvent them. To know what we're dealing with if Quirrell makes a move. Agreed, Harry said. Ron, who had been playing chess across the common room, looked up at them. He'd caught enough of the conversation to have an expression of resigned acceptance. We're going to end up in trouble about this, aren't we, he said. Deep trouble. Not 10 points trouble. Possibly, Harry admitted. Okay, Ron said. He moved a piece on the chessboard. What do we need to do? The confrontation with Quirrell came in June, and it came because Quirrell moved first. Harry knew he was going to. The signs had been accumulating through the spring term, Quirrell's attention shifting from watchful to urgent, something building in the energy behind his careful surface, the frequency and intensity of the wrong note increasing like a tide coming in. He was going to move before the end of term. Harry had been watching the clock. The night Quirrell went for the stone, Harry knew about it before he went. Not from magic, from watching. He'd spent 6 months learning the castle's rhythms well enough that deviation was readable. Quirrell's movement pattern that evening was wrong in 3 specific ways, and Harry identified all 3 and was moving within 60 seconds of spotting the first. He told Ron and Hermione. Ron took a breath and stood up from the chessboard. Hermione closed her book. Together, Hermione said. Together, Harry agreed. But I go last. Through the protections. Whatever's at the end, that's mine. They both looked at him. Not with argument. With the specific steadiness of people who understood that some things were genuinely someone else's to carry, and that accepting that was its own kind of courage. The trapdoor. The devil's snare, which Hermione handled with the calm efficiency of someone who had memorized all 800 pages of 1,000 magical herbs and fungi. The flying keys, which Harry navigated on a conjured broom of water-hardened current and caught in 40 seconds. Ron's chess game, which he played with a brilliance that was entirely his own, sacrificing his piece with a cool steadiness that Harry thought was one of the bravest things he'd ever seen. And then Harry alone in the final chamber, facing the mirror of Eriste. He looked in the mirror. He saw himself standing in the deep Atlantic with the trident in his hand and Arthur beside him and Mara and Vulko and the whole of Atlantis lit up behind them. His family. His home. He wanted it. He looked at it fully and let himself want it, because the mirror showed desire and denying desire was a different thing from mastering it. Then he reached into his pocket and the stone was there. He'd understood the mirror's logic the moment he saw it, the protection that gave the stone only to someone who wanted to find it rather than use it. He felt it in his hand, small and warm and enormously powerful, and turned around. Quirrell was behind him. Without the stammer, without the nervous academic surface. He stood straight and looked at Harry with those urgent eyes, and the thing underneath him was fully present now, not wearing him, operating through him, the dark power that had been patient in Quirrell's body like a parasite waiting for the right moment. "Give me the stone," Quirrell said. "No," Harry said. It was, objectively, a simple word. But it had weight. 7 years of learning what he was had put weight in it that landed in the chamber like the ocean landing on a reef, enormous and entirely confident of its own nature. Quirrell moved. He was faster than a normal man because whatever animated him had access to power that normal men didn't. He reached for Harry with hands that crackled with dark energy, and Harry stepped aside from the first grab with the easy economy of someone who'd been training in currents that moved faster than human reflexes for 7 years. The gold-green magic came up without deliberation. Harry didn't reach for it or call it. It was simply there when it was needed, because he and it were the same thing now, had been growing into the same thing for years. He caught Quirrell's second grab and held it, and where his hand touched Quirrell's wrist the land magic and the ocean magic ran together and the reaction was immediate and violent, Quirrell's flesh blistering, the dark power inside him recoiling, a scream that had 2 voices in it, one human and one not. Quirrell wrenched back. His face was gray with pain and shock. He'd known Harry was powerful. He hadn't known this. "You can't," he said. "You were a child." "I am a child," Harry said. "It doesn't mean what you were told it meant." The dark voice, Voldemort's voice, distinctive even through Quirrell's mouth, cold and furious and underneath the fury something that Harry could identify as genuine unease, said, "Who are you?" "Harry Potter," Harry said. "And you tried to kill me when I was 15 months old." He crossed the chamber. Quirrell tried to stop him twice more. Both times Harry moved through the attempt with the same unhurried certainty, deflecting with water constructs and land magic barriers that he built and dissolved with the ease of breathing. On the third contact, Quirrell grabbing his arm, Harry held on. The reaction was catastrophic for Quirrell. The combined magic burned through the contact like deep-sea pressure crushing a surface vessel. Quirrell's body couldn't sustain the channel of it, couldn't survive being the medium through which 2 ancient and opposing forces met. He collapsed. The dark entity tore itself free with a sound like tearing water and rushed past Harry in a blast of cold fury, a formless shriek that moved through the chamber and was gone. Quirrell lay still on the stone floor. His face was peaceful in a way it hadn't been all year. Whatever he'd been when he wasn't being used, Harry couldn't know. He hoped it had been something worthwhile. He closed Quirrell's eyes. Then he pocketed the stone and walked back toward the entrance chamber. Dumbledore arrived in the corridor outside as Harry was climbing out through the trapdoor. The headmaster took one look at him, the stone visibly bulging in his pocket, the gold-green glow still fading from his hands, the complete absence of the injury or distress the headmaster had clearly expected, and his expression moved through several things very quickly. "Quirrell," he said. "Incapacitated," Harry said. Voldemort separated from the host. "The stone is here." He held it out. "You should probably do something more permanent with it." Dumbledore took the stone. He held it for a moment. He looked at Harry with those sharp and kind eyes, and what was in them now was something Harry hadn't seen from him before, something unguarded. "I owe you an apology," Dumbledore said. "More than one." "Yes," Harry said simply. "But not tonight." He looked at the headmaster. "Tonight I'd like to go find my friends and make sure they're okay." Dumbledore nodded once. Harry went. Ron had a broken leg from the chess game and was in the hospital wing being fussed over by Madame Pomfrey and complaining about it with the energetic discontent of someone who was fine and found enforced stillness extremely challenging. Hermione was beside his bed with a book she wasn't reading, which was how Harry knew she'd been worried. They both looked at him when he came in. "Done," Harry said. Ron let out a long breath. Hermione closed the book she hadn't been reading. "Quirrell," she said. "Gone. Both of them." He sat in the chair on Ron's other side. "The stone is with Dumbledore." "You're unhurt," Hermione observed. She was looking at his hands, the gold-green glow had fully faded now. "How are you unhurt?" "I was careful," Harry said. "You faced Voldemort," Ron said. "Being careful seems like it might not fully cover it." Harry looked at them both. He thought about the chamber, and the mirror, and what it had shown him. He thought about the simple fact of them being here, in this hospital wing, with their broken legs and their closed books and their genuine uncomplicated care about whether he was whole. "I had something to come back to," he said. Ron and Hermione looked at each other over his head with the mutual acknowledgement of people sharing an emotion they didn't have language for yet. Ron punched Harry lightly on the shoulder, because he was Ron. Hermione handed Harry a chocolate frog from the stack someone had brought Ron, because she was Hermione. Harry ate the chocolate frog and sat with the people who were becoming the surface half of his home, and felt the two halves of himself, the Ocean King and the 12-year-old boy, sitting side by side in the same body without contradiction. Outside, somewhere over the castle, June rain was starting. It tapped against the hospital wing windows with the patient rhythm of water doing what water did, finding its level, filling the available space, going where it was needed. Harry listened to it and was quiet. Chapter 6, The War Beneath and Above. Summer arrived in Hogwarts the way it always did, suddenly, like a decision made overnight, the castle waking up one morning to find the grounds green and the air warm and the whole long year compressed into the particular exhaustion and relief of the last week of term. Harry spent that week doing 3 things. He finished his exams, which were straightforward to the point of being meditative. His understanding of surface wizarding theory had deepened enough over the year that the first-year curriculum felt like reading the early chapters of a book he'd already finished. He wrote letters home, long ones, detailed ones, the kind that took hours because he wanted to give Atlantis back something real rather than a summary. And he watched. ORM had moved. The intelligence had come through Tula 3 days before the end of term, relayed through the merfolk diplomatic chain that Atlantis used for surface-adjacent communication. Not a political move this time, not a petition or a council maneuver or a careful legal argument. Something else. Tula's message was spare and factual in the way her messages always were, which made it more unsettling rather than less. ORM has made contact with a surface faction. Not the main government. A splinter group. Old families with old money and old grievances. The nature of the contact is unclear. The timing is not coincidental. Harry read the message twice and sent a reply asking for everything Tula could get. He told Ron and Hermione about it in the Gryffindor common room that evening, because keeping them out of things he knew about had stopped feeling right sometime around Halloween. Hermione looked up from the message with the focused expression of someone who was already building a framework. Old families with old grievances, she said. In the current climate, that's Death Eater adjacent. People who supported Voldemort or would again. ORM is trying to neutralize Harry's authority by attacking it from both sides, Ron said. He was playing chess, but his attention was entirely on the conversation. Ron's ability to track multiple things simultaneously had consistently surprised Harry, and had stopped surprising him by November. Below and above. If he can destabilize Atlantis' relationship with the surface world at the same time as he's pressuring the council from inside, then the Wizard King claim becomes politically untenable, Hermione finished. Not because it's illegitimate but because the environment supporting it is compromised. That's my read, Harry said. What do we do? Ron asked. Harry looked at the message. I go home, he said. I need to be in Atlantis in person. This isn't manageable from 600 fathoms away. He packed that night. Arthur met him at the surface. Not at a dock or a beach, in the water itself, 40 meters out from the Cornish coast, appearing from the dark swell like something that had been there all along and had simply chosen to become visible. Harry had swum out from the shore and been underwater for 10 seconds before Arthur was beside him, and for a moment neither of them said anything. They just existed in the same water, and that was enough. You look taller, Arthur said. It's been a year, Harry said. How's the shoulder? You said in March it was bothering you. Fine. Healed. Harry looked at him. Tell me about ORM. Arthur's expression did the thing it did when he was holding something down. He turned and they went deep together, the familiar descent, the pressure and the dark and the bioluminescence beginning. He's been careful, Arthur said, as they went down. Everything I can trace is legal. The contacts he's made on the surface, there's nothing I can point to and call a crime. He's had 20 years of watching councils make decisions and he knows exactly where the lines are. But the timing is what you said. And the people he's talking to aren't people who want peace. Arthur paused. 3 of them lost family at Godric's Hollow. Not on the right side. Death Eaters, Harry said. Former. Officially. None of them were prosecuted, they claimed coercion. Arthur's voice carried the flat quality it got when he was containing something specific. They want Voldemort back. They've been working toward it in small ways for 10 years. And ORM has decided they're useful. And they've decided ORM is useful, Harry said. Atlantis' military capacity against whatever Dumbledore can put together, that's a significant advantage if you're planning something large. Yeah. What does ORM actually want from them? He doesn't want Voldemort's vision. He has his own. Arthur was quiet for a moment. Leverage, he said. Against me. Against you. Something that makes the case to the council that outside influence, he glanced at Harry, specifically yours, has made Atlantis vulnerable. If the surface world becomes a threat that can be traced back to your presence here, then my being here becomes the argument against my being here, Harry said. He creates the problem and then offers himself as the solution. That's what Volko thinks. Volko's right. The lights of Atlantis were visible below them now, the gold-blue shimmer rising through the dark water like a second sky. Harry watched it coming. ORM smart enough to know that direct opposition to the ocean magic's choice is a losing argument long-term. But undermining the political viability of that choice, that's a different game. He's been playing it for 7 years, Arthur said. He has. And he's nearly ready to play the last round. Harry felt the deep current shift that meant they were entering Atlantis' outer sphere, the city's own circulation reading their approach the way a living thing reads the arrival of something familiar. Where's Mara? Waiting for you, Arthur said. She's also furious. About the year, about Quirrell, about the stone. A pause. She will express this by immediately putting you through a training session. Good, Harry said. I've been going soft. Arthur looked at him sideways. You knocked out a mountain troll with plumbing. Surface plumbing, Harry said. Barely a challenge. Arthur laughed. Real and complete and uncomplicated, the laugh that Harry had learned was the real one, not the public Arthur laugh, which was still genuine but slightly performed. This one. This was the one that meant everything was, whatever else was happening, essentially right. Mara's training session was 3 hours long and did not go easy on him. She pushed him through every advanced combination they developed over the past 3 years, water manipulation and land magic integrated, the dual current approach he'd used in the Atlantic trials scaled up and refined, the precision work on targeted constructs that could operate independently once deployed. She pushed him through the combat applications with a thoroughness that said she'd been thinking about the gaps in his preparation for months. She didn't ask him how he was. She never asked that directly. Instead she watched, and what she was watching for was whether the year on the surface had dulled anything, loosened any of the precision, cost him anything that mattered. By the second hour she had her answer, which was no, and something else, which was that the year had added things she hadn't anticipated. His wand work had given his land magic a syntactical precision it hadn't had before. The two systems talking to each other had developed new vocabulary in both directions. She had him demonstrate the integrated approach against a current simulation of a human-scale opponent. He built a water construct restraint, locked it with land magic seal, and disintegrated both in 4 seconds. She had him run it 3 more times with variations. The surface spells are useful, she said, which for Mara was close to enthusiastic praise. The structure of them, Harry agreed. The grammar is transferable. Show me the disintegration sequence using wizarding syntax. He did. She watched it. Something in her expression moved through assessment and into something else, the specific attention she paid to things that were changing her understanding of what she was teaching. You've integrated them, she said. Not just running in parallel. Actually integrated. By about March, Harry said. It happened during the exam prep. The two systems were working on the same problems and they found common grammar. Mara was quiet for a moment. She looked at him, really looked, the way she did when she was putting a whole picture together rather than just the part she was working on. The prophecy describes the Wizard King as someone who holds 2 kinds of power in one current, she said. Not wielding them in sequence. Holding them simultaneously. I know, Harry said. You're there. I know. She held his gaze. Don't be modest about it, she said. Not with me. Not ever with me. I'm not being modest, Harry said. I'm being accurate. There's a difference. The corner of her mouth moved. Then she hit him with a fast current drill that he had to move through at full speed, because Mara's emotional moments never lasted more than about 30 seconds before she put them back in the training framework where she was more comfortable. He moved through it cleanly. She nodded once. Volko's briefing was the next morning and it ran for 4 hours, because Volko had been compiling intelligence for a year with the focused intensity of a man who had nothing else to do except be brilliantly useful, which was largely true. The surface dark families, 7 of them, spread across Britain and France and 1 in the eastern Baltic, had been in contact with ORM's intermediaries for 8 months. The contact had been about information exchange initially, Atlantean military capacity, patrol patterns, political structure. Things that would be useful to anyone planning to use Atlantean power as a pressure point against the surface wizarding world's defenders. What did ORM tell them? Harry asked. Significantly less than they asked for, Volko said. He's not stupid. He didn't give them anything that would constitute a genuine security breach. He slid a document across the table. What he gave them was possibility. The suggestion that Atlantis could be a neutral party in a surface conflict. That the right arrangement might mean Atlantis stayed out of a renewed wizarding war entirely. Harry looked at the document. He told them we'd step aside. He suggested it was conceivable, Volko said carefully. Under the right circumstances. Under circumstances where I'm discredited or removed as Wizard King, Harry said. That would be consistent with the sequence of events he's constructing, yes. Harry sat back. He thought about ORM, 7 years of thinking about ORM, understanding his logic, mapping his genuine beliefs against his tactical choices. ORM was not evil. ORM was a man who loved Atlantis with a fierce and total conviction that it was in danger from outside influence, and who had concluded that extraordinary measures were justified in service of something he genuinely believed he was protecting. The tragedy of it was that he wasn't entirely wrong. Atlantis was in danger. The surface world, with its wars and its dark powers and its centuries of violent human conflict, was a genuine threat to the stability of the deep. ORM's diagnosis was real. His prescription was catastrophic. If Atlantis steps aside, Harry said, and Voldemort returns and wins, then the surface world falls under a power that will absolutely eventually turn its attention to the ocean, Volko said. ORM understands this intellectually. His belief is that an Atlantis under his own leadership, free of surface entanglement, would be militarily capable of defending against that eventuality. He's wrong, Harry said. Yes, Volko said. But he doesn't know he's wrong, and his certainty makes him very hard to convince. Harry looked at the mark on his hand. The 7 seal marks on his arm. He thought about the Pacific Current, and the Southern Ocean Ancients, and the thing the Arctic had said in the final trial. Someone has to. Because the ocean trusted me first. Where is he now? Harry asked. In Atlantis, Volko said. He arrived 2 days ago. He's called a council meeting for tomorrow. Harry looked up. What's the agenda? A motion, Volko said, and his voice went carefully neutral in the way it did when he was about to say something that required Harry to be steady, to formally review the legitimacy of the Wizard King appointment on the grounds that the appointed king's extended absence from Atlantis constitutes an abandonment of the role and a severing of the sea bond. Harry was quiet. It won't pass, Volko said. The sea bond is demonstrably intact, the trident has been glowing steadily since you arrived yesterday, the current patterns in the city shifted the moment you came back. No serious constitutional scholar would argue the case. But ORM doesn't need it to pass. He needs the debate on record. He needs the narrative that the position is contested, Harry said. And simultaneously, Volko hesitated. What? The surface dark families. Tula's latest intelligence, arrived this morning. Volko slid another sheet across. They're moving. Something is happening on the surface. Not Voldemort, he's still too diminished after the Philosopher's Stone. But his followers, acting in anticipation of his return. There's an operation planned. The target is, he paused, Atlantis's surface interface. The communication arrays we use to maintain contact with the surface world. If they're destroyed, Atlantis goes dark, Harry said. Isolated. And in the immediate aftermath of a council motion questioning my legitimacy, he looked at Volko. It's coordinated. Almost certainly, Volko said. The timing is too precise to be coincidence. Harry stood up. ORM doesn't know they're going to attack the arrays, he said. It wasn't a question. Volko looked at him carefully. What makes you say that? Because ORM is smart enough to know that an attack on Atlantis by surface forces, any attack, would be the thing that makes the council unite behind me, not behind him. He would never authorize it. Harry looked at the document. The Dark families have been feeding him information and taking information from him, and they've been running a parallel operation the whole time that he doesn't know about. They've been using him the same way he's been using them. The silence in the archive room had the quality of a thing clicking into place. He's going to be furious, Volko said softly. Yes, Harry said. Which means I need to talk to him before the council meeting. He found ORM in the deep gardens, the formal sea flower cultivations that occupied the lower terraces of the palace complex, where careful Atlantean horticulture had been growing things of extraordinary beauty for 3,000 years. ORM walked there when he was thinking. Harry had known this for years, through Tula's careful observation, and had filed it away as one of those details that would eventually be necessary. Today was the day it was necessary. ORM heard him coming and stopped between two columns of deep-sea anemone that were doing something extraordinary with their bioluminescence, casting slow pulses of blue and gold across the garden paths. He turned and looked at Harry with those calculating eyes that had been calculating for 7 years. "You're back," ORM said. "Last night," Harry said. He stopped a few meters from ORM and looked at him directly, the way he looked at everything he was taking seriously. "You called a council meeting." "I did." "I'm not going to argue the legitimacy motion," Harry said. "The evidence makes the argument on its own and both of us know it." He paused. "That's not why I'm here." ORM's eyes sharpened very slightly. He recognized the shift in approach, he was good at that. "Then why are you here?" "To tell you something you don't know yet," Harry said. "About the people you've been talking to on the surface." He laid it out clearly and completely, the parallel operation, the communication array targets, the timeline, the fact that the dark families had been running ORM the same way ORM had been running them. He gave ORM the intelligence without editorializing, without using it as a point-scoring exercise, in the same tone he'd used to brief Arthur or Vulko. Factual. Direct. Treating ORM as someone capable of handling the truth rather than someone to be managed around it. ORM listened. His face was very controlled, but Harry watched the tells, the jaw, the hands, the quality of the stillness that wasn't the same as his usual considered stillness. He was angry. Not at Harry. At the realization. When Harry finished, ORM was quiet for a long moment. The bioluminescent anemones pulsed around them, indifferent and beautiful. "How long have you known?" ORM said. "The full picture." "Since this morning." "Pieces of it for a year." "And you came to me?" "Yes." "Not to Arthur first?" "No," Harry said. "Arthur would have come to you too, but he'd have come as a political superior addressing a subordinate. I'm coming to you as," he paused, finding the right frame, "as someone who thinks you're wrong about several things but right about one important one, and who would rather have you working in the same direction than opposing it while the thing you love most is under real threat." ORM looked at him. The calculation in his eyes was still there, but it had shifted, the thing being calculated had changed. "You think I'm right," ORM said, flatly. "About Atlantis being vulnerable to surface entanglements, yes," Harry said. "You're not wrong about the danger. You're wrong about the solution." He kept his voice even. "An Atlantis that isolates itself doesn't become safer. It becomes a target that doesn't see the attack coming until it's too late. The surface world has been breaking itself in wars for centuries. The only thing that ever changes the trajectory is someone who can stand in both worlds and speak both languages. And that's you," ORM said. "The ocean thought so," Harry said. "I've spent 12 years trying to be worth the thought." He met ORM's eyes. "You love this place." "I know you do." "That's not a tactical observation, it's true and it matters." He paused. "So do I. Which means we want the same thing. We just can't agree on how to get it." The deep garden was quiet around them. Somewhere in the city, the early watch was changing, the soft percussion of Atlantean routine moving through the water. ORM looked at Harry for a long moment. His expression was doing something complicated that Harry didn't try to map entirely, some of it was too private to be read fairly. "The council meeting," ORM said finally. "Pull the motion," Harry said. "Not for my sake. Because the timing makes it a gift to whoever wants us divided right now, and you're better than that." Another long pause. "The communication arrays," ORM said. "When?" "Tonight, according to Tula's intelligence. A surface team. Small, precise. They know the array locations, they got the information from somewhere. From someone who got it from me, ORM said. There was a specific quality to his voice. Not guilt exactly. Something more controlled than guilt. I gave them general patrol pattern information. The arrays would be inferable from that. If you knew what to look for. You didn't know what they were going to do with it, Harry said. ORM looked at him sharply. Don't make excuses for me. I'm not, Harry said. I'm making a distinction. There's a difference between naivety and malice, and it matters when we're deciding what to do next. He looked at ORM steadily. Can you pull together the information you gave them? Everything. Full picture. Yes, ORM said. Then meet with me and Arthur at the 7th hour. Bring everything. Harry turned to go. Potter. Harry stopped. Why? ORM said. The single word had several layers. Why tell me, why trust me with this, why treat this as a collaboration rather than a confrontation? Harry looked back at him. Because you're part of Atlantis, he said. And because the ocean doesn't make mistakes about who belongs to it. He paused. Even when they make mistakes themselves. He walked back toward the palace. Behind him, the anemones pulsed their slow gold-blue light, and ORM stood between them and did not move for a long time. The meeting at the 7th hour was the most productive 3 hours Harry had spent since the Atlantic trial. ORM brought everything, meticulous, organized, because whatever else ORM was, he was thorough. The intelligence picture that assembled itself from his contribution was clear and alarming and complete, a 7-family surface operation that had been using ORM as an information conduit for 8 months, building toward an operation that would simultaneously destroy Atlantis's surface communication capacity and use the evidence of a surface attack to justify a renewed push for surface world political control by pro-Voldemort factions. Not to bring Voldemort back directly, he was too diminished for that yet. But to demonstrate to the Wizarding World's neutrals and undecideds that Dumbledore's coalition couldn't protect them. That the old power was re-emerging. That cooperation was safer than opposition. Arthur listened to the full briefing with the focused quiet that meant he was angry and working it into something useful. He looked at ORM for a moment after it was finished. Something passed between them that Harry didn't fully read, brothers negotiating something that didn't have words yet. The arrays, Arthur said. We defend them. We do more than defend them, Harry said. We let them reach the arrays. Both of them looked at him. If we intercept before they reach the arrays, we stop the operation but we lose the evidence trail. The people who sent them stay clean. The surface dark families walk away and plan something else. Harry looked at the map on the table between them. We let them reach the arrays. We document the approach, the entry, the activation sequence of whatever they're using. We catch them in the act. He looked at Arthur. Then we have everything we need to take to the International Confederation. Not speculation. Evidence. Arthur looked at the map. The arrays will take damage. Yes. We can rebuild arrays. Harry kept his voice even. We can't rebuild the political case once they scatter. Arthur looked at ORM. ORM looked at the map. His expression was doing something Harry had never seen it do, a kind of internal negotiation that was working out what he was in relation to the people in this room. I can get the team composition, ORM said. I know the intermediary. I can make contact and get names, timing, method. Tonight. That would make this significantly cleaner, Harry said. Don't thank me, ORM said, curtly. This is, he stopped. I'm fixing something I contributed to. Yes, Harry said simply. No more than that. No over-acknowledgement, no performance of generosity. ORM didn't want it and it wasn't the point. 7th hour tonight, Arthur said. We position. Harry, I need to be at the arrays, Harry said. Not alone. No. But I need to be there. Arthur looked at him. That familiar tension, the protective instinct against the steady, reasonable certainty in Harry's expression. 7 years and it still moved through Arthur the same way. He still made the same choice at the end of it. Not alone, he said again. But he didn't say no. The surface team arrived at the communication arrays at the second watch change, when the patrol rhythm was at its minimum coverage, which told Harry they had good intelligence and had planned carefully, which in turn told him that whoever had organized this was professional in the specific way of people who'd been doing dark things for a long time and were good at it. 3 of them. Surface world wizards in dark clothing, moving through the water with mobility charms that were good but not Atlantic native. They moved like people who'd learned to swim in a pond, Harry thought, watching them from 40 meters away in the absolute dark of the outer array sector. Not quite right. Not quite reading the current correctly. He let them reach the first array. Let them place the device, a deep-water disruptive charge, technically impressive work. Someone who understood both surface magic and deep-water physics had designed it. He documented everything through the water sense that gave him the whole spatial picture as precisely as sight. When the second device went on the second array, he moved. He came up through the water from below, from the direction they weren't watching, because the water from above was where they expected trouble and the water from below was home in a way they couldn't match. The gold-green magic went out ahead of him in a wide net construct, ocean water and land magic braided together, and it hit all 3 of them simultaneously with the contained force of a deep water pressure differential. None of them were hurt. They were simply stopped. Locked in a current construct that held them in place with the same casual completeness as a reef holds a tide pool. They struggled for about 30 seconds, tried various countermeasures that were technically competent and entirely insufficient, and then stopped. Harry floated in front of them. He looked at them with those steady green eyes and the gold-green glow of the construct around them, and the 7 seal marks on his arm lit up in the dark. The devices, he said, in a voice that carried perfectly through the water. The activation codes. The names of the people who sent you. You'll give me all of it. One of them, the leader, Harry had him tagged, tried bravado. You have no authority on the surface. We're not on the surface, Harry said. We're in the Atlantic Ocean, 1,000 meters below sea level, within Atlantis's sovereign waters. He tilted his head slightly. And I'm the Wizard King of 7 seas. I have authority in every water on the planet. A pause. Give me the codes. The leader looked at him for a long moment. He looked at the construct holding him, at the pressure behind it, at the 12-year-old with ancient magic in his hands and an ocean behind him. He gave Harry the codes. Arthur emerged from the dark water to Harry's left a moment later with 2 Atlantean guard lieutenants, and the process of formally detaining, documenting, and beginning the legal process became Arthur's domain, which was where it belonged. Arthur was better at formal process than Harry, in the way of someone who had been the head of a civilization longer and had more practice with the procedural elements. Harry watched it happen and let it happen and floated in the dark water and felt the ocean all around him, enormous and patient and present. The devices were disarmed. The arrays were intact. The evidence was documented and packaged and sent through the Atlantean diplomatic channels to the International Confederation within 12 hours, along with a formal brief from Arthur's office that was precise and thorough and attached ORM's intelligence contribution without, notably, attaching ORM's name to it in any compromising way. Harry had asked for that specifically. Vulko had drafted it. The council meeting happened that afternoon. ORM withdrew the legitimacy motion before it was called, citing new political developments that made the timing inappropriate, which was formally bland and politically explosive in the way of things that everyone understood and no one had to acknowledge. The council registered the withdrawal without visible reaction, because Atlantean councils were excellent at not reacting visibly to things. After the council, in the corridor outside the chamber, ORM passed Harry. He stopped for a moment. He didn't say anything. He looked at Harry with those eyes that had been calculating and opposing and occasionally grudgingly reassessing for 7 years, and what was in them now was layered in a way Harry made no attempt to fully read. The motion would have failed, ORM said. I know, Harry said. I want it on record that I withdrew it because it was tactically wrong, not because, I know, Harry said again. It's on record. ORM held his gaze for another moment. Then he nodded once, short and precise, and walked away down the corridor. Harry watched him go. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt something more useful than triumph, the particular satisfaction of a problem being navigated correctly rather than defeated. Defeating ORM would have been easier. It also would have made an enemy of someone who loved Atlantis with the same fierce totality that Harry did, and Atlantis didn't need that. The ocean didn't need that. The international response to the evidence brief came in 2 stages. The first stage was the International Confederation of Wizards convening an emergency session and formally requesting Atlantis's cooperation with an investigation into the surface operation. Arthur handled this through official channels with the polished efficiency of a king who had been dealing with international diplomatic requests for 20 years. Atlantis cooperated fully and received formal acknowledgement of its sovereign waters and the legitimacy of its response. The second stage was a letter from Dumbledore. It arrived through the merfolk chain, personal rather than official, in the headmaster's distinctive theatrical handwriting. Harry read it in the archive room with Volko present, because he'd decided a long time ago that having a witness for significant communications was good practice. The letter was 3 pages long. It said many things with considerable grace and precision. The essential content was, I was wrong about what I thought I was dealing with. I would like to discuss what we're both dealing with now, together, if you're willing. Harry turned the letter over. Thought about the man who had written it, brilliant, arrogant, genuinely motivated by love for a world he'd been protecting for 60 years through methods that had included serious errors in judgment. He thought about what Dumbledore had said in the office at Hogwarts, that last night of term, you remind me of your mother. He thought about the promise he'd made, tell me about her sometime. He wrote back. 2 paragraphs. Yes. Come to the surface interface on Saturday. Bring tea if you have a preference. I'll bring the intelligence on Voldemort's current state that I've been compiling since October. Volko looked at the reply. You've been compiling intelligence on Voldemort since October, he said. Since Quirrell, Harry said. When something that dangerous has been that close to you, you track it. Volko looked at the reply for another moment. You're going to tell him everything? Not everything, Harry said. What's relevant? What helps? He paused. Dumbledore has been fighting this war alone, in his own head, for 30 years. That's not a strength. It's what happens when someone capable of enormous good has also gotten very comfortable with the belief that they're the only one capable of the judgment calls. He looked at Volko. He's not the only one now. No, Volko agreed softly. He's not. Saturday was clear and warm, the surface chop light, the kind of Atlantic day that felt like the ocean making an effort. Harry came up through the water and sat on the flat rock of the interface platform, a shelf of worked stone that served as the formal surface contact point for Atlantean diplomatic interaction, located on a remote piece of the Irish coast where the current kept casual visitors away. Dumbledore arrived exactly on time, which Harry had expected of him. He came by broom, a small, practical one, not showy, which Harry took as an intentional choice, and landed on the platform and looked at Harry sitting cross-legged on the rock with the trident resting beside him and the seal marks visible on his arm and the Atlantic wide and blue behind him. You're 12, Dumbledore said. Not as a contradiction. More like someone reminding himself of a fact that kept sliding out of his grasp. For a few more months, Harry said. Sit down. You brought tea. Dumbledore produced a flask from his robes. He sat down across from Harry on the rock and poured. I confess, he said, that I'm not entirely certain what I expected. Something more manageable, Harry said. Something I had more context for, Dumbledore said, which was more honest. He handed Harry a cup. The operation against the arrays. You handled it with, I've been briefed by the Confederation. You handled it with the precision of someone who had been doing this kind of work for years. I have been, Harry said. At 12. The ocean doesn't wait for you to be ready, Harry said. It requires you to become ready. Dumbledore looked at him over his cup. The intelligence on Voldemort, he said. You mentioned October. He's building toward a return, Harry said. Not this year. Not next year, probably. But his followers are reorganizing, not all of them, not openly, but the core of them are in contact with each other in ways they weren't 2 years ago. The Philosopher's Stone failed, but the attempt itself was a signal. He's past the stage of theoretical return and into the stage of active planning. He laid it out, everything he'd compiled, the threads of intelligence from Tula and from Vulko's surface sources and from his own observations during the year at Hogwarts. He gave Dumbledore the picture completely, because the picture was only useful if the person who needed to act on it had it whole. Dumbledore listened with the absolute focused attention of someone who had been waiting for this information and was also, Harry could see, recalibrating everything he thought he knew about what Harry had spent the last year doing. You've been running intelligence work from inside Hogwarts, Dumbledore said, when Harry finished. I've been paying attention, Harry said. Same thing. A pause. There are things I should tell you in return, Dumbledore said. About the prophecy. About what I've been planning, and what I now think about those plans. I'd like that, Harry said. Dumbledore talked for an hour. Harry listened. The afternoon light moved across the Atlantic in long gold pale sheets, and somewhere below them Atlantis went about its deep and patient business, and two people who had been on opposite sides of a very large chessboard sat on a rock in the Irish Sea and began, slowly and carefully, to build something that resembled trust. It wasn't complete. It wasn't simple. Dumbledore's habits were 60 years old and didn't dismantle in an afternoon. Harry's wariness had been hard-won and wasn't set aside because of a single good conversation. But it was a start. And starts were how things became other things. That evening, back in the deep palace, Harry went to the vault. The trident was blazing when he arrived, not the quiet pulse of its resting state but fully lit, all its old writing illuminated, the metal almost too bright to look at directly. He stood in front of it for a moment and let himself feel what it was doing, the recognition, the acknowledgement, the thing that had been waiting 10,000 years for exactly this convergence of land and sea and self. He picked it up. The ocean moved through him the way it always did when he held it, full Atlantic scale, every current and every creature and every kingdom and every grain of sand on every ocean floor, and this time he didn't try to hold it at arm's length or process it in portions. He let it be as large as it was. He was large enough now to hold it. He thought about the Pacific Current and the Southern Ocean ancients. The Arctic's question. The Mediterranean's grief and what it was asking him to carry. He thought about Arthur at Southend, hand extended. About Mara in the training courtyard the first week, the water rising gold-green and her going still in the recognition of it. About Vulko setting tablets down at 3 in the morning and staying up talking because the conversation was worth the cost. He thought about Ron moving his chess piece with that steady frightened courage. About Hermione closing a book she hadn't been reading. About the hospital wing and the rain and the chocolate frog. He thought about ORM in the deep garden between the anemones, standing with something complicated happening in his face that was the beginning, maybe, of a different kind of relationship to the thing he loved. He thought about a woman with red hair and green eyes whose face he carried in no memory but whose name lived in him the way the ocean lived in him, always there, always moving, the thing that had been his before he knew how to be anything. He stood in the vault with the trident blazing in his hand and the deep ocean all around him and felt himself, fully, completely, without apology or qualification. Both kinds of magic. Both worlds. The king the ocean had chosen and the boy who had been found in a cupboard and the 12-year-old who had spent a year in a surface school making friends and dismantling dark plots and beginning, in the slow and irreversible way of things that are actually happening, to change what was possible. The trident lit up the vault. Harry let it. He was not afraid of his own light. He found Arthur on the terrace that night. Of course he did. It was the terrace, where the important conversations happened, where the deep water moved below and the city glowed above and the space between them was large enough for anything that needed to be said. Arthur was leaning on the railing with a cup of something warm, looking out at the ocean with the comfortable expression of a man in his element. He heard Harry coming and moved slightly to make room. Harry leaned on the railing beside him. They looked at the ocean. "Dumbledore?" Arthur said. "Good. It'll take time. But good. ORM. Also good. Also time. The surface families. In Confederation custody. The brief is solid. Their network is exposed." Harry paused. "It's not over. None of it is over. Voldemort is still building toward a return, and when he gets there it's going to be a real fight." "I know," Arthur said. "And Hogwarts, you're going back." "Yes," Harry said. "It matters. Both worlds matter." Arthur was quiet for a moment. The deep water below them moved in its slow enormous rhythm, the bioluminescent traces of deep-sea creatures making their brief and beautiful marks in the dark. "7 years ago," Arthur said, "I was tracking a pollution source and I ended up on a suburban street in Surrey." "I know," Harry said. "You've told me." "I haven't, actually. Not all of it." Arthur looked at the water. "I almost didn't knock. I told myself I was going to walk away. It wasn't my business, it wasn't Atlantean business, I didn't know what I was going to do with a surface child even if I did knock." A pause. "And then you spoke through the slat. About the ocean being where things belong when no one wants them." Harry held very still. "And I thought," Arthur stopped. Started again. "I thought, well. I know something about that." The deep ocean moved below them. The city glowed. Somewhere in the palace, the night watch moved through its careful patterns, and somewhere in the 7 seas, things were living and dying and changing at the pace that things lived and died and changed, enormous and indifferent and full of meaning simultaneously. "Arthur," Harry said. "Yeah. I want you to know something." He looked at the water. "The cupboard. Privet Drive. The whole of it before you knocked." He paused, finding the right words, not performing them, just finding them. "It was before. This is now. And now is," he stopped. "This is everything," he said quietly. "All of it. You and Mara and Vulko and Atlantis and Ron and Hermione and Dumbledore starting to become something reliable. All of it." He looked at Arthur directly. "I'm not missing anything. I want you to know that." Arthur was quiet for a long moment. His jaw was doing its holding things down thing, which Harry had years of experience identifying and respecting. "Good," Arthur said. His voice was steady. His eyes were very bright. They stood on the terrace and looked at the ocean, the way they had been standing on terraces and looking at oceans for 7 years, and the deep water went about its enormous patient work, and the wizard king of 7 seas leaned on the railing next to the man who had knocked on a door and felt, with the clean and uncomplicated certainty of water finding its level, completely at home. The mark on his hand pulsed. The city breathed. The ocean held them both. Above, somewhere past the weight of all that water, the surface world was doing what the surface world did, moving, changing, building towards something, the tangled and constant human business of conflict and love and reckless hope. A war gathering itself in the dark. A school waiting for September. 2 friends in a tower somewhere, probably arguing about homework and meaning it as affection. Below, Atlantis. Between them, Harry. Not caught. Not divided. Not choosing one over the other because the ocean had known from the beginning that the point was never the choosing. The point was the holding of both. The place where 2 oceans met, and the water between them ran clean. He looked out at the deep and felt it look back. The oldest acknowledgement in the world, here you are. Here I am, Harry thought back, and meant it absolutely. The tide turned.